Welcome, welcome. You're here at DC Harry. Today we present to you, Flash found Harry in cupboard age 4 and Speed Force combined with magic creating fastest wizard alive. Like and subscribe if you want more awesome stories. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 1, The Cupboard. The energy signature didn't make sense, and Barry Allen had learned to pay attention to things that didn't make sense. He stood on the pavement outside the Central City Police Department at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, staring at his phone screen where Cisco's message sat in a bright blue bubble, weird readings coming from Surrey, England. Not Speed Force exactly, but Ig man, it's like Speed Force ate something it shouldn't have. You should look. Below that, coordinates. Below that, a blinking ghost emoji and nothing else. Barry looked up at the sky. Clear night. Good running weather, not that weather ever really stopped him. He texted back, on my way, and was already moving before he hit send. The Atlantic took him 4 minutes. He'd done it in 3 before, but he wasn't racing anyone tonight, and something about the reading Cisco had flagged made him want to arrive with his head clear rather than his pulse screaming. The signal wasn't dangerous, or at least, it didn't feel dangerous. It felt small. Quiet. Like a candle in a dark room, the kind you notice not because it's bright but because everything around it is so completely still. Surrey materialized around him in the way places did when you ran, not gradually, the way it looked on a map, but all at once, a sudden solidity of hedges and identical houses and the very specific English smell of cut grass and approaching rain. He slowed to a jog and then to a walk as the coordinates narrowed him down to a residential street that looked like it had been designed by someone whose only reference for what a neighborhood should look like was a catalog photograph of a neighborhood. Privet Drive. Every house was the same. Same width, same roof pitch, same tidally aggressive flower beds that said we are respectable in the language of petunias and begonias. The cars were all sensible. The street was absolutely silent. Barry checked his phone. The signal was coming from number 4. He stood on the pavement in his civilian clothes, jeans, a gray Star Labs hoodie that Cisco had given him as a joke but which he'd started wearing unironically, and looked at the house. Lights off except for a faint blue flicker upstairs that said someone was watching television. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained what Cisco's equipment had picked up from 3,000 miles away. He walked up the front path anyway. He almost knocked. He got his hand up and everything, and then the signal pulsed, not dramatically, not like an alarm, but like a breath, like something small and sleeping turning over, and he stopped with his knuckles an inch from the door and stood very still. It wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from the cupboard under the stairs. Barry stood there for a second. He was a forensic scientist and a superhero, and he had faced metahumans and gorillas and a man who could literally turn back time, and he had learned over the course of a very strange career that the correct response to something is wrong here was not to talk yourself out of it. He stepped back off the front step, moved around the side of the house with the particular quiet of a man who could move faster than sound when he needed to, and pressed one hand flat against the exterior wall in the approximate location of what would be the understairs cupboard. The signal was right there. Right on the other side of the bricks, faint and slow and unmistakably alive. He straightened up and went back to the front door and knocked. The television upstairs went quiet almost immediately, which meant whoever was up there had been waiting for something, which told him something he didn't like. Footsteps across the ceiling. Footsteps on the stairs, heavy, deliberate, the footsteps of someone who wanted you to know they were coming and wanted you to find that intimidating. The door opened on a large man in striped pajamas who looked at Barry with the immediate and specific hostility of someone who considered a stranger on their front step at midnight to be a personal affront. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" the man said. "Almost midnight," Barry said pleasantly. "Sorry for the late hour." "I'm with," he flashed the badge he kept in his wallet, the one that said Central City Police Department, which was technically true even if the jurisdiction was a little optimistic. "I'm following up on some reports of unusual activity in the area." "Nothing serious." "Routine check." "Could I come in?" The man, Dursley, Barry would learn later, the name was on the mortgage, which he'd looked up in the 4 seconds it had taken for Dursley to open the door, looked at the badge the way people looked at things they didn't want to be true. His jaw worked. His wife had appeared at the top of the stairs behind him, a thin sharp-faced woman clutching her dressing gown closed, and she was looking at Barry with the expression of someone who has spent considerable time worrying about exactly this kind of knock on the door. "What sort of unusual activity?" Dursley said. "Energy readings," Barry said, keeping his voice easy and nonspecific. "Totally routine. Could I just come in for a few minutes?" They didn't want to let him in. He could see it, the way Dursley filled the doorway, the quick look that passed between husband and wife, the microsecond of calculation. But the badge was real and the tone was official and the hour was late enough that causing a scene felt risky, and eventually Dursley stepped back with visible reluctance and Barry walked into number 4, Privet Drive. The house was neat in the way that said neatness was a form of control. Everything in its place, everything matching, framed photographs on the wall of a large blonde boy at various ages doing various wholesome things, playing football, holding a birthday cake, grinning the particular grin of a child who had never been told no. Barry clocked all of it in the peripheral way he clocked everything, and he walked down the hall with his phone out like he was checking readings, and he stopped in front of the cupboard under the stairs. It had a lock on it. A proper bolt lock, exterior mounted, the kind you put on things you need to keep inside. Barry looked at it for what felt like a long time but was probably 2 seconds. "What's in here?" he said. "Storage," Dursley said immediately. "Just storage. Coats and whatnot." Barry looked at the lock. He looked at the door. There was a very small sound from inside, a shift of weight, something alive and careful and completely practiced at being quiet. He thought about the energy reading and the way it had felt like a breath, like something sleeping. He put his hand on the bolt. "You can't just," Dursley started. Barry slid the bolt and opened the door. The cupboard was small. That was the first thing, it was barely big enough to be called a room, more of a widening in the space beneath the stairs, the ceiling angling sharply down on the left side where the staircase pressed in. There was a cot shoved against the far wall, child-sized, with a thin blanket. A shelf above it held a handful of small objects, a toy car with one wheel missing, a drawing done in crayon of what might have been a person or might have been a sun, some broken pieces of what had once been a plate arranged with the careful deliberateness of someone who had run out of things to arrange. And on the cot, sitting up with his knees pulled to his chest and his enormous eyes catching the hallway light, was a boy. He was 4 years old. Barry would learn that too, later, that Harry Potter had been 1 year old when he was brought to this house and had been in this cupboard, in varying degrees, for 3 years since. But right now all he knew was what he saw, a child, very small, very thin, with a mess of black hair and a scar on his forehead shaped like a lightning bolt and the expression of someone who had learned to take stock of every new situation before deciding whether to be afraid. He wasn't afraid. That was the thing that hit Barry first and hardest. The boy looked at him with those green eyes, absurdly green, unnaturally green, the green of deep water and old forests, and he wasn't afraid. He was assessing. "Hi," Barry said. His voice came out softer than he'd intended. The boy said nothing. He had a bruise on his left forearm, yellow-green the way bruises went when they were healing from something worse. His feet were bare and the cot had no pillow. Barry straightened up. He turned around. Vernon Dursley had gone very red. His wife had descended 2 steps on the staircase and stopped there, and she was looking at a point somewhere to the left of Barry's head with the determined blankness of someone who has decided not to see something for so long that the not seeing has become its own kind of sight. Barry looked at Dursley for a moment. He did not use his police badge voice. He did not use the careful official neutrality he'd been employing since the door opened. He thought about the energy reading and what Cisco had said, Speed Force 8 something it shouldn't have, and he thought about the toy car with the missing wheel and the drawing of the sun and the practiced, absolute quiet of the child on the cot, and he said, in a voice that was very level and very calm, "How long has he been sleeping in there?" It wasn't a question. The flatness of it seemed to surprise Dursley, who blustered through the beginning of an explanation, perfectly comfortable, healthier than you'd think. The boy was a strange one, not normal. Things happened when he was around, strange things. They'd done their best under extremely difficult circumstances, and Barry let him talk because listening was useful and because the alternative was something he was actively choosing not to do. When Dursley stopped, Barry turned back to the cupboard. He crouched down in the doorway so he was at eye level with the boy on the cot. The green eyes tracked him steadily. There were faint shadows under them that had no business being on a 4-year-old's face. "What's your name?" Barry asked. A pause. Then, very quietly, "Harry." "Hi Harry. I'm Barry." He paused. "I know that rhymes. I think it might be destiny." Nothing on the boy's face, but something in the eyes shifted slightly, not a smile, not yet, but the ghost of a consideration of a smile, which Barry decided to count as a victory. "Are you hungry?" Another pause. Harry looked at him like hunger was a trick question, like answering incorrectly might cost him something. "It's okay," Barry said. "You can say yes." "Yes," Harry said. "Very small. Very careful." Barry stood up. He turned around again. What followed was not pleasant. It involved a phone call to the Surrey police that Barry made from the front step while Dursley argued and Petunia Dursley stood at the top of her stairs in absolute petrified stillness and Harry sat on his cot in the cupboard and ate the peanut butter sandwich Barry had made him from the kitchen. Barry had walked into the kitchen without asking and made the sandwich and walked back and handed it over and Harry had eaten it with the focused efficiency of someone who did not take food for granted. The Surrey police arrived. Social services was called. Things were said and documented and the night became a machine of procedures that Barry fed information into steadily, and all the while the energy reading pulsed softly from somewhere in the center of the small boy sitting on the cot eating a second sandwich that Barry had also made without asking. At 2 a.m, Harry Potter was wrapped in Barry's Star Labs hoodie, it went to his knees and the sleeves covered his hands completely, and sitting in the back of Barry's rental car, which Barry had gotten from the airport, which was 40 minutes away by normal human transportation and 17 seconds away by Barry Allen transportation. Harry sat with perfect straight posture and looked out the window. Barry sat in the front seat and thought about what he was doing. He was a single man in his early 30s with an apartment that had 3 times as many pizza boxes as pieces of furniture, a job that regularly required him to run through explosions, and no plan whatsoever. He had called the Surrey police and triggered the child protective system and that system would take over now, that was how it was supposed to work. There would be a foster placement, an investigation, the Dursleys would face consequences. He could fly home. He had a case file on his desk about a metahuman who was apparently robbing banks by dissolving the vault walls, which was a much more professionally appropriate use of his particular skills. The energy reading pulsed again, warm and quiet. Barry looked in the rearview mirror. Harry was still looking out the window, but he'd curled his feet up onto the seat and pulled the hoodie around himself more thoroughly, and he was watching the English countryside go past with an expression of such concentrated attention that it made Barry's throat feel strange. Like the boy was memorizing it. Like he was saving it up in case someone took it away. "You doing okay back there?" Barry said. Harry's eyes moved to the mirror and found his. "Where are we going?" "Right now. A nice place with people who are going to make sure you're all right." He paused. "After that we're still working on it." Harry considered this. "Are you a policeman?" "Kind of," Barry said. "I catch bad guys." "Did you come for me?" The question was asked the way only very small children and very old people ask things, with no layering, no performance, just the question itself sitting out in the open. Barry thought about Cisco's ghost emoji and the energy coordinates and the bolt lock on a cupboard door and the way the speed force, that vast, humming, impossible river of energy that ran under the skin of everything, had apparently decided to reach out and touch a 4-year-old who was very small and very quiet and very good at not taking up too much space. "Yeah," he said. "I came for you." Harry turned back to the window. After a moment, in a voice so quiet Barry almost missed it even with his enhanced hearing, "Okay." The Speed Force pulsed warm and satisfied, and Barry Allen drove through the English night toward an uncertain future with a small child in his hoodie and no plan at all, and the strange, settling, terrifying certainty that this was exactly where he was supposed to be. The social worker's name was Gwen, and she was good at her job in the way that people who had chosen a difficult job because they actually meant it were good at it, thoroughly, a little wearily, with a specific kind of warmth that survived paperwork and bureaucracy and 2 a.m. phone calls. She met them at the emergency intake office in Guildford, and she looked at Harry, who sat on a plastic chair eating a bag of crisps Barry had found in the vending machine, and she looked at Barry, and something moved across her face. "You're the one who called it in," she said. "Yeah." "Good," she said simply, and the word carried a lot of weight. The paperwork took an hour. Harry sat through it all with the same straight-backed patience he'd had in the car, answering questions when asked, eating his crisps methodically, watching adults with those assessing green eyes. Twice, while they were waiting, Barry felt the energy shift, not Cisco's reading exactly, more like the air going briefly denser, briefly warmer, as if something was testing the boundaries of itself. Once, when Gwen stepped away to take a phone call, Harry's crisp bag rustled on its own even though there was no draft, and Harry looked at it with the expression of someone who has noticed something and is carefully pretending they haven't. Barry looked at the crisp bag. He looked at Harry. "Does that happen a lot?" he asked, nodding at the bag. Harry's eyes came to him sideways, cautious, waiting for the reaction. "The strange stuff," Barry clarified. "Things moving. Things happening." A pause. Then, barely, "Uncle Vernon doesn't like it." "Uncle Vernon," Barry said carefully, "can mind his own business." He pulled his chair slightly closer. "I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to just think about it, okay? You don't have to say anything." Harry waited. "I can move faster than lightning. Like, actually faster than lightning. And before I could do that, the world was a lot smaller, and a lot of people didn't understand me, and a lot of things happened that seemed strange and wrong and impossible. But they weren't wrong. They were just," he thought about how to say this to a 4-year-old, "they were just a different kind of right than most people knew about." Harry looked at him for a long time. Then, "How fast?" Barry grinned. He couldn't help it. Of all the follow-up questions. "Faster than anything," he said. "Want to see?" Harry's eyes went a little wider. "Not here," Barry said. "Sometime. But I'll show you." Something shifted in Harry's face. Not trust, exactly. Trust was a thing this particular child had clearly learned to give out in very small increments over very long periods. But something adjacent to trust. Something that was deciding whether trust might be possible, which Barry figured was the best starting point available. Gwen came back with forms. The night kept going. At 4 a.m, with Harry asleep in a temporary room that was still significantly more than a cupboard and significantly less than anything Barry would call adequate, Barry stood in the hallway with Gwen and asked the question that had been building since he'd slid that bolt. "How long does the placement process take? Before he'd be permanently with a family?" Gwen looked at him with the clear eyes of someone who had just heard a question she was going to enjoy answering. "Why do you ask?" Barry started, and then stopped, because the honest answer was I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing and approximately zero qualifications for what I'm about to suggest, and that wasn't quite the right tone. He tried again. "He's alone," he said. "And he shouldn't be." And he thought about the energy reading and the lightning bolt scar and the way Harry had said okay in the car like it was something he'd been waiting to say for a very long time. "I think maybe I found him for a reason." Gwen looked at him for a moment. "You'd be looking at 6 months minimum," she said. "Background checks, home visits, assessments. And you're American, so there's an international component." "Right." Barry nodded slowly. "Can I stay in the area for a few days? While the initial placement is being sorted?" "There's nothing stopping you." "And can I visit? While the process runs?" "He can have visitors if he wants to." "Okay." Barry looked down the hallway toward the door of the temporary room. The energy reading had quieted to something barely perceptible, the way it might when the thing generating it was deeply asleep. Okay. I'll need to make some calls. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Cisco that read, "I need you to run a background check on me. Really thorough. Make me look like the best possible person to raise a kid." Cisco's response came back in 30 seconds, "Who are you and what did you do with Barry?" Then, 3 seconds after that, also on it. Then, because it was Cisco, also what kid? Barry put his phone away. He stood in the hallway of an emergency care facility in Guildford, England, and he thought about the Dursleys' house and the bolt on the cupboard door and a small boy who had learned to be quiet and take up very little space, and he thought about what he knew about finding the thing that was going to change your life. It usually looked impossible right up until the moment it didn't. He went and found a chair in the waiting room and sat down, because he wasn't leaving, and called Joe. Joe West answered on the second ring, which meant he'd been awake, which was a Joe West thing. The man seemed to have built sleep entirely optional for himself over the course of a distinguished law enforcement career. "Barry? It's 4 in the morning. I know. I need advice." A pause. "This gonna be the kind of advice where I need to be sitting down?" "Probably." Barry heard the creak of a chair. "Okay. Go." "Say, hypothetically," Barry said, "someone found a kid who needed help. And say that person was in a position to provide that help and had all the right reasons to do it and absolutely none of the practical qualifications." Joe was quiet for a moment. "How old's the kid?" 4. "What's his situation?" Barry told him. Not everything, not the energy readings and the speed force component, not yet, but the important parts, the cupboard and the bruise and the practiced silence and the careful, assessing green eyes. He told Joe about the crisp bag and the look Harry had given him and what he'd said in the car. Joe listened without interrupting, which was its own kind of answer. When Barry finished, Joe said, "You already decided, didn't you?" "I think so," Barry said. "Is that crazy?" "Raising a kid is the craziest thing there is," Joe said. "Doesn't mean it's wrong." A pause. "You know I'm going to help." "I know," Barry said. "I was counting on it. Iris is going to want to meet him immediately." "I know that too." "Bring him home when you can," Joe said, and his voice had the particular warmth it got when something mattered to him, the warmth Barry had grown up depending on. "We'll figure the rest out." Barry hung up and leaned back in his plastic chair and looked at the ceiling of the waiting room, which was the particular institutional cream color of all waiting room ceilings everywhere, and felt the energy reading pulse once more from down the hall, warm, and quiet, and patient. 6 months later, with Cisco having performed what Barry could only describe as a masterwork of legal documentation and character reference orchestration, with Joe having provided a testimonial that the reviewing social worker had actually described as moving, with home visits completed to Barry's Central City apartment which had by that point been completely transformed by the application of money and genuine effort into something that actually looked like a place a person could live, with an international adoption framework that had required 3 lawyers and a conversation with the Central City Police Commissioner that Barry was never going to fully recover from. Harry Potter boarded a plane at Heathrow Airport and flew to Central City, and Barry Allen was waiting for him at the gate. Harry had grown 2 inches in 6 months. His hair was still chaotic. He was carrying a small backpack with a lightning bolt drawn on it in red marker. Gwen had told him, and Gwen was sworn to secrecy about the source, that Barry Allen could run faster than lightning, and Harry had apparently spent the intervening months thinking about this very carefully. He came through the arrivals gate holding a care worker's hand and looking around the terminal with those systematic green eyes, and when he spotted Barry he stopped. Barry crouched down and opened his arms. Harry let go of the care worker's hand and walked toward him, and then stopped about 3 feet away, and looked at him with an expression that was very serious and very small. "You actually came," Harry said. "I said I would," Barry said. Harry seemed to weigh this, the saying against the doing, the promise against the person standing in front of him, all the complex mathematics of a child who has learned to double-check everything. Then he closed the remaining 3 feet and walked into Barry's arms, and Barry picked him up, backpack and lightning bolt and all, and Harry Potter buried his face in Barry's shoulder and held on with both hands. The speed force hummed through both of them like a chord struck on a vast instrument, resonant and certain, and Barry closed his eyes and thought, okay. Okay. Here we go. The care worker was crying. Barry pretended not to notice for the sake of professionalism and also because he was fairly close to it himself. Can I see it now? Harry's voice was muffled against his shoulder. See what? How fast you are. Barry laughed, a real one, sudden and relieved. Yeah, he said. Yeah, you can. He set Harry down, checked the terminal's security camera positions from habit, found a moment of crowd gap and low foot traffic, and grabbed Harry's hand. Hold tight, he said. Harry looked up at him with eyes that were equal parts nervous and blazing with something that wanted to be called excitement. He grabbed Barry's hand with both of his. Barry ran. Not flat out, not the kind of run that broke the sound barrier and turned the world into a smear of color, but fast. Terminal length fast, fast enough that the world went slightly blurred at the edges, fast enough that they were at the far end of the terminal and back before most of the people they'd passed had fully registered movement. Harry made a sound that started as something frightened and transformed midway, somewhere around the turn, into something entirely different, a high bright sound of pure, unguarded delight. When they stopped, Harry was gripping his hand with white-knuckled intensity and breathing very fast and looking at him with an expression that had nothing careful in it at all. Again, Harry said. Barry looked at this small, thin, green-eyed boy who had spent 3 years learning to be quiet and small and to not ask for things, and who had just, for the first time, asked for something purely because he wanted it, and he said, without hesitation, as many times as you want. The energy in Harry flared, warm and gold and crackling, and if any of the passengers in Terminal 4 at Heathrow Airport saw a shimmer of heat lightning on a clear June day, they mostly put it down to jet exhaust or seasonal anomaly or one of those strange things that happen sometimes without explanation. Harry laughed again, louder this time, and Barry Allen ran, and the speed force sang, and somewhere in the deep physics of two impossible things finding each other, a door opened that was never going to close again. Chapter 2, 10 years running. The first thing Harry broke was a coffee mug. He was 5 years old, sitting at Barry's kitchen table doing the worksheets that Barry had gotten from the school board because the formal enrollment process was still 2 weeks away and Harry had made it absolutely clear, not with words but with the particular focused intensity he brought to every new thing, that he wanted to learn. The worksheet was math, simple addition, single digits, and Harry had burned through the front page in 4 minutes and was halfway through the back when the pencil snapped. It was an accident. He'd pressed too hard, the way kids did, the way anyone did when they were concentrating. But something sparked in Harry's face at the sound, a flinch that was too practiced, too deep, the kind of flinch that had nothing to do with pencils, and before Barry could say anything, every mug on the kitchen counter lifted 6 inches off the surface and hung in the air. They stayed there for 2 seconds. Barry counted. Then they came down, and the one on the far left, the one that said world's okayest CSI that Cisco had given him as a birthday joke, hit the counter at a slightly wrong angle and exploded into 4 pieces. Harry froze. Barry looked at the pieces of the mug. He looked at Harry, who had gone very still in that particular way, not the stillness of a calm child but the stillness of a child who was waiting to find out what the broken thing was going to cost him. Barry got up, walked to the counter, picked up the 4 pieces of the mug, dropped them in the bin, walked back to the table, and sat down. "You've got better aim than I do," he said. "I would have knocked all of them off." Harry stared at him. "I've got another pencil," Barry said, and opened the kitchen drawer. The stiffness in Harry's shoulders took about 4 more minutes to fully leave, but it left, and that was what mattered. By the time he was 6, Harry's accidental magic had developed a personality. It responded to his emotions with the precision of a very accurate mirror, startlement produced sharp little pops of displaced air, happiness made things glow softly at the edges, and concentrated frustration had, on one memorable occasion, caused every window in the apartment to rattle in its frame for 30 seconds while Harry struggled with a reading passage that used the word onomatopoeia without any contextual warning. Barry had sat there listening to the windows rattle and thought, okay. This is something we need to understand. The problem was that Barry understood the speed force with his body more than with his mind. He knew it the way you knew your own heartbeat, present, reliable, almost ignorable until the moment it wasn't. He didn't have a science of it, not exactly. What he had was Cisco. He drove Harry to STR Labs on a Saturday morning when Harry was 6, in the car rather than at speed because Harry had developed very strong opinions about when they ran and Barry had decided early on that Harry's comfort was not a negotiating point. Harry sat in the passenger seat, seatbelt on, which was still a marvel to Barry every single time, the normalcy of it, and watched the city go by with that cataloging attention he gave everything. "What's STR Labs?" Harry asked. "It's where smart people who like making impossible things possible go to work," Barry said. "Are you smart?" "People disagree on that." "Are you good at making impossible things possible?" Barry thought about this. "I'm pretty good at being impossible." Which is sort of adjacent. Harry considered this for a block and a half. "Is the person we're visiting smart?" "Cisco." "Terrifyingly." Harry nodded once, satisfied, and went back to watching the city. Cisco was in the workshop when they arrived, 3 different half-finished projects spread across his workbench in the organized chaos that was his natural habitat, wearing a t-shirt that said "I paused my game for this" and headphones around his neck and an expression of enormous intellectual self-satisfaction that evaporated into something much more exposed the moment he saw Harry. "Oh," Cisco said. Barry, he's so small." "He's 6, Barry said. "He's incredibly small." "I'm right here," Harry said. Cisco pointed at him. "I like him." "You said that about the dog at the shelter too," Barry said. "And we talked about that. I maintain that the dog was also an excellent choice and I will die on this hill." Cisco crouched down to Harry's level, which Barry appreciated. Most adults didn't do that. "Hi. I'm Cisco. I'm the person who built most of what keeps Barry from dying. Do you know how dangerous he is to himself?" Harry glanced at Barry. "Pretty dangerous." "Astronomically dangerous," Cisco said, with feeling. "He once ran into a building that was actively on fire to save a cat. The cat bit him." "The cat was scared," Barry said. "The cat weighed 4 pounds and bit you hard enough to draw blood." "It was scared," Barry repeated, with dignity, and looked at the ceiling. Harry was not laughing. But the edges of his eyes had crinkled very slightly, and his mouth was doing something it occasionally did where it wanted to become a smile but hadn't quite committed. Barry had spent 6 months learning to read Harry's face like a language with most of its grammar implied rather than stated, and he counted the almost smile as a full one. The testing Cisco did that morning was gentle and thorough and disguised as interesting, because Cisco was, when he decided to be, very good with people. He had Harry hold different materials and run his hands over various surfaces while sensors that Harry couldn't see tracked the energy fluctuations Cisco had been measuring from the original Surrey readings. He had Harry think about things that made him happy and things that made him nervous, and he measured what happened to the air around him. He had Barry run a lap of the workshop with Harry watching, and he measured what happened then too. At the end of 2 hours, Cisco sent Harry to the break room with a bag of pretzels and a tablet loaded with a documentary about how rockets were built. Harry had mentioned, in the car, that he wanted to know how things worked, which Cisco had received with the reverence of a man recognizing a kindred spirit, and then Cisco sat across from Barry and pulled up his readings on the large monitor. "Okay," Cisco said. "So. What?" "So the magic, and I'm calling it magic because that's what it is, don't give me the face, the magic in him and the speed force are not 2 separate things happening in the same body." Barry leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I mean they're merged. Integrated. Like, at the fundamental level they're interfering with each other the way 2 wave patterns interfere. They're not fighting it, There, Cisco made a gesture with both hands that communicated something between intertwining and resonance. They're harmonizing. The speed force is in his cells already, Barry. Not as strong as yours, but it's there. And the magic is, he paused, turning back to the screen with the expression he got when something was genuinely stretching the edges of his comprehension, the magic is using it as a framework. Like the speed force is the circuitry and the magic is the current that runs through it. Barry was very quiet for a moment. Is that good? Cisco thought about it properly rather than reassuring him reflexively, which was one of the things Barry trusted most about him. It's not bad, he finally said. It's unprecedented. It's completely unprecedented, actually. But the readings are stable. More than stable, they're reinforcing each other. He's not going to tear himself apart. That was going to be my next question. I know. Cisco turned back to the monitor. Here's the thing though. You need to teach him to run. Barry blinked. He's 6. I know. But the speed force is already in him and it's not going to wait for him to figure out what it is by himself. He needs a framework to understand it through. Right now his magic is doing things on its own because he doesn't have the vocabulary to control it, and if he gets older without that vocabulary, Cisco shrugged, the shrug of someone who has run the calculations and found the results unhelpful, the harmonics get harder to manage. Think of it like pressure in a pipe. Right now it's fine. Give it a few years without an outlet and, got it, Barry said. Also, Cisco added, I think he might be a little bit faster than you. Barry looked at him. I'm just saying. The potential readings, I heard you the first time. I only said it once. You said it with your face, Barry said, like 4 more times. Cisco looked at the monitor. Barry looked at the break room door, through which the faint sounds of rocket documentary narration were audible. Okay, Barry said. I'll start teaching him. Teaching Harry to run was one of the most unexpectedly joyful things Barry Allen had ever done, and he had experienced a non-trivial amount of joy in his life. The problem wasn't aptitude, Harry had aptitude the way the sky had upward. The problem was that Harry had spent the first 4 years of his life being told, in the particular wordless way that environments could tell you things, that his body was something to keep small and quiet and unobtrusive, and unlearning that took time. At first, in the broad parking lot of the STR Labs complex on Sunday mornings with the lot cleared and Cisco watching from a distance with equipment that looked like it was designed to survive a small nuclear incident, Harry ran like he expected someone to ask him to stop. Short bursts, shoulders slightly up, always checking. Barry watched this for 2 weeks and then he did something he'd been thinking about since the airport. He ran alongside him. Not faster. Not demonstrating. Just alongside, matching pace, the two of them going up the lot and back, Barry at what for him was a crawl and for Harry was currently the outside edge of what he could sustain, side by side. No instructions. No technique notes. After about 10 minutes of this, Harry's shoulders came down. After 15, he stopped checking over his shoulder. After 20, he went faster than Barry was going, spontaneously, without calculation, because he was a 7-year-old who had just figured out that he could and no one was going to stop him. The speed force lit up in Harry like a switch being thrown in a dark room. Barry felt it happen, the ambient electrical charge of the parking lot spiked, the overhead lights flickered even though they were on a separate grid, and Harry went from the 100-meter pace he'd been holding to something that left a blur afterimage and covered the length of the lot in under a second. He hit the far concrete barrier at the end before he worked out how to stop. It was a loving concrete barrier and it didn't particularly mind, and Harry bounced off it with the rubberball resilience of a child whose body was threaded through with the speed force, and sat down on the ground and looked at his own hands. Barry ran to him and crouched down. You okay? Harry looked up. His hair was even more chaotic than usual from the running, and his eyes were blazing, and his right hand had a small cut on the palm from the concrete that was already, Barry noted, beginning to close. I went fast, Harry said. You went incredibly fast, Barry confirmed. How fast? Barry pulled out his phone and showed Harry the number on Cisco's speed tracker app. Harry stared at it. His lips moved slightly. "Is that good?" Harry said. "Harry," Barry said, "I didn't go that fast until I was struck by lightning for the second time." He paused, letting that land. "You're 7. Harry looked at the number again. Something moved across his face that was bigger than the almost smile, something wider, more uncertain, more precious for being uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to feel as good as he felt. Barry watched him figure it out in real time, watched him decide. Harry decided. He looked up at Barry with a grin that rearranged his whole face, crooked, and slightly wild, and so completely unguarded that it punched the air from Barry's chest. "Again," Harry said. "Always again," Barry said, and stood up, and they ran. Iris West came into their lives the way Iris came into most things, decisively, at high speed, and with complete certainty that she was exactly what was needed. She'd met Harry for the first time when he was 5 and Barry had brought him to Sunday dinner at Joe's, and Iris had sat across the table from him and looked at him with the particular focused empathy she normally reserved for investigations that mattered to her, and then she'd asked him, simply and directly, what his favorite thing was. Harry had looked at her with his careful eyes and said, after a moment's consideration, lightning, and Iris had looked at Barry over his head with an expression that said about 47 things simultaneously, and then she'd looked back at Harry and said, "Tell me everything about lightning then," and by the end of dinner Harry had talked more continuously than Barry had ever heard him talk, and Iris had listened to every word. She was his, after that. Not in a possessive way, in the way that certain people became yours because they chose to be, clearly and completely, and made it easy for you to choose them back. She drove him to school when Barry's shifts ran late. She took him to the library on Saturday afternoons and sat at a reading table and worked on her articles while Harry worked his way through the natural science section with the systematic focus of someone who viewed a library as a problem to be solved. She was at every school event that Barry couldn't make and some he could, because Harry ran faster when he knew she was watching. Joe was bedrock. Joe was the adult in the room at every gathering, the voice of practical good sense when Barry and Cisco got too theoretical, the person who came to Harry's school when there was a problem with another kid without needing to be asked. Joe had been Barry's father in all the ways that counted, and he extended that to Harry with the same uncomplicated generosity, and Harry, who had been given reasons to mistrust the very concept of adults who were supposed to take care of you, came to trust Joe with the particular depth of trust that only formed slowly and never broke. Cisco became the person Harry went to when something wasn't working and he couldn't figure out why. This was initially because Cisco built and fixed things and Harry had a mechanical curiosity that could only be called professional in a 9-year-old, but it evolved into something broader. Cisco had a genius for explanation that didn't condescend, for making complexity accessible without flattening it, and Harry had the receptive intelligence of someone who genuinely wanted to understand rather than just know. They spent many Saturday mornings in the STR Lab's workshop building increasingly complicated things and arguing about the science of magic and the magic of science, and Barry would sit on a stool and listen to them and feel something in his chest that was too large to name comfortably. School was not uncomplicated, but it was manageable, which was a distinction Harry seemed to understand clearly. He was 2 years ahead academically by 4th grade without trying hard, which created the specific social difficulty of being the smart kid in a context where smart kids were both envied and resented. He handled this with the diplomatic pragmatism of someone who had learned early to read rooms. He didn't perform, he didn't show off, but he also didn't hide, because Barry had been explicit about that early on. "You don't hide who you are," Barry had said, when Harry came home at 8 with the specific expression of someone who had been considering making himself smaller. "You don't have to put up a billboard about it. But you don't hide." Harry had looked at him for a moment. "What if people don't like it?" "Some people won't," Barry had said honestly. "Those aren't your people." Harry had thought about this for a week and then apparently decided to agree with it, because after that the hiding didn't happen. He was himself, clearly and consistently, quiet and observational and occasionally devastating in his academic assessments and prone to wandering the edges of conversations with a focused interest that most adults found either charming or slightly unnerving depending on their comfort with being accurately perceived. The magic kept developing. By the time Harry was 8, it was no longer the reactive, emotional thing it had been when he was smaller. It was becoming intentional, still instinctive, still deeply tied to the Speed Force's electrical grammar in a way that made it look and feel fundamentally different from anything Cisco had read about in his deep dive into magical theory, but increasingly directed. Harry could move objects deliberately now, not just accidentally. He could produce light, not just glow. He could feel the electrical signature of things around him the way Barry could feel the Speed Force humming in the world's kinetic structure, and he was learning to read that signature the way you read handwriting, with attention and practice and the developing sense of a language coming into focus. And then there was the morning in August, 3 weeks before Harry's 9th birthday, when it all went wrong in the most spectacularly right way. They had been running. It was early, the city not yet fully awake, the long straight stretch of the STR Labs access road empty and gold with morning light. Harry had been doing speed intervals at Cisco's suggestion, building the kind of sustained acceleration that was different from the sprint and stop pattern he'd naturally defaulted to. Barry ran alongside him, pacing, and Harry had been going faster than his usual ceiling for about 30 seconds when Barry felt it. Not in his own body. In Harry's. A change in the Speed Force field between them, a surge, not dangerous, not explosive, but like watching a river suddenly run double its usual depth. Barry glanced over. Harry's eyes had gone from their normal green to something that wasn't quite a color, the same way lightning wasn't quite a color, white gold and momentary and impossible to look at directly. Barry said, Harry said nothing. He went faster. Not faster than Barry's comfortable pace. Faster than Barry's maximum pace. Barry pushed. Harry matched him. Barry pushed harder. Harry matched him again, and then exceeded him, not by much, not by a fraction of the gap that Barry suspected was theoretically possible but by enough that Barry was, for the first time in his running career, chasing someone rather than leading. The Speed Force in Barry roared in recognition, the way it did when it encountered itself, the deep harmonic vibration of the same fundamental energy moving through a different vessel. And the magic in Harry answered it, crackling gold-white along the road surface in their wake, and then something between the two of them happened that Barry had no scientific vocabulary for and no emotional vocabulary for either and could only describe afterward as, a door opening. The explosion leveled half of STR Lab's training wing. Not with debris, there was no structural collapse, no injury. Cisco was fine and was already diving for the readings with the particular focused greed of someone who had just witnessed something that would keep him busy for 6 months. It was more like a detonation of pure energy, a shockwave of combined speed force and magic that went out in a perfect circle from the point where Barry and Harry had been running and blew every window in the training wing, knocked every piece of loose equipment off every surface, and produced a column of white gold light visible from the center of Central City that the news station spent 3 days trying to explain with reference to weather phenomena and electrical discharge and various other things that were wrong. Barry was standing in the middle of the road when it happened, knocked sideways by the wave of energy, and he shook his head clear in time to see Harry standing 20 meters away facing him, chest heaving, hands at his sides with white gold lightning crackling between his fingers in a way that was becoming. Barry stared at him. Harry stared back. The lightning between his fingers crackled, settled, and then went still, absorbed back into his skin. "Sorry," Harry said. His voice was very controlled for someone who had just turned the training wing into a modernist art installation. "Don't be," Barry said immediately. Cisco's voice came through the comms channel, which had somehow survived, reading, "I'm reading, Barry, the harmonics are," a pause that contained approximately 17 pages of scientific processing. "They're unified. They're completely unified. The speed force and the magic are running on the same, it's like they were waiting for this, Barry, it's like they were always going to." Another pause. "Someone owes me 6 training wing windows," Cisco said, with feeling. "I'll pay for them," Harry said, at exactly the same time as Barry said, "I'll pay for them," and they looked at each other, and Harry's mouth did the thing, the almost smile that was actually a full smile that was actually, on days like this, in light like this, with white gold lightning still visible at his fingertips if you knew to look, one of the best things Barry Allen had ever seen. "I'll pay for half," Harry said. "Deal," Barry said. They were standing in the wreckage of a morning that had just permanently changed the laws of physics as they applied to one specific 9-year-old boy, and Barry felt the speed force sing in his chest like it was pleased with itself, and he looked at Harry standing in the August light with his impossible eyes and his storm-current hands and thought, all right then. Everything's different now. Everything was, in fact, different now. The training changed. What had been running and endurance and the occasional focused magic exercise became something more comprehensive, not exactly combat training, not yet, but the kind of fundamental education in control and power and the relationship between those two things that Barry had learned the hard way through trial and explosion and only gradually constructed into something teachable. Cisco designed protocols. Barry adapted them in real time to Harry's particular configuration. Harry absorbed them with the methodical focus of someone who understood that control was freedom, not restriction, that the faster and harder you could go, the more precisely you had to know how to stop. He was patient with his own learning in a way that still occasionally surprised Barry, given what Barry knew about the frustration tolerance of 9-year-olds as a general category. But Harry had come from a situation where patience had been a survival tool, and while the survival context was long gone, the patience had evolved into something more useful, a genuine equanimity with the gap between where he was and where he was going, a capacity to work the problem without needing the problem to be solved immediately. He got a wand at 9, not through Ollivander, not yet, not before Hogwarts, but through a magical craftsperson in London's hidden quarter who Cisco had found through a very long and winding research process that had started with, "I cannot believe magic is real, I need to understand everything about it immediately," and ended 6 months later with a woman named Adeline Voss who worked from a shop in an alley off Diagon that most witches and wizards didn't know existed and who made wands that were, as she put it, conversation partners rather than tools. She'd spent an hour with Harry, testing, letting him hold various woods and cores, watching the way his energy interacted with different materials. Barry sat in the corner of the small shop and watched her watch Harry and said nothing. Adeline was in her 60s and had the contained, weather-beaten competence of someone who had been genuinely expert at her particular thing for a long time, and she watched Harry the way a very skilled reader watched a difficult text, with concentration and the occasional private nod at something only she was following. She gave him blackthorn with a core of lightning-struck oak heartwood, not a traditional core, not dragon heartstring or phoenix feather or unicorn hair, oak that had been split by a natural lightning strike and harvested at the site and kept for 14 years because she'd known, she said, that she was keeping it for something specific and hadn't known what until now. Harry held it and the white gold lightning ran up his arm from his fingers to his shoulder in a clean, bright line, and the wand glowed the same color back. "Yes," Adeline said, simply. "That's the one." Barry looked at the wand in Harry's hand and thought about Surrey and the cupboard and the energy reading that had pulled him across the Atlantic to a bolt lock on a small door, and he thought the Speed Force had a sense of narrative that was either profound or deeply irritating depending on his mood, and right now his mood was the former. Harry turned the wand over in his hands. "It feels," he paused, looking for the word. "Like it was already mine." "It was," Adeline said. She looked at Barry over Harry's head. "Both things are already his," she said, in a tone that communicated she knew rather more about the situation than could be accounted for by an hour's wand fitting. "Your job is just making sure he knows how to carry them." Barry was quiet for a moment. "Working on it," he said. She nodded. She wrapped the wand in cloth and handed it to Harry, who held it the way you held something that mattered, carefully, but not too carefully, the way you held something you trusted not to break. Walking back through the hidden quarter toward the ordinary London street where Barry's rental was parked, Harry turning his wand in his fingers with the same continuous attention he'd given the rocket documentary 6 years ago, Barry thought about the Hogwarts letter that was coming. It had to come. He'd done enough research by this point to understand the mechanism, the way magical children in Britain were automatically enrolled, the letter that arrived at 11. He'd thought about it, and prepared for it, and had the conversation with Harry in a general way. You're magical, there are schools for magic, at some point you'll probably go to one, without the specific detail, because specificity would come with the letter and the letter wasn't here yet. But it was coming. He knew it was coming the way he knew things were coming when the Speed Force was involved, not precognition, nothing so clean as that, just the sense of the current running in a particular direction, the feel of something arranging itself around a fixed point in the near future. The letter arrived on July 31st, which was Harry's birthday, which Barry privately found on brand for a universe that had been making thematic choices around Harry Potter since well before he'd arrived in the picture. They were in the kitchen. Barry was making breakfast, actual breakfast, the kind involving effort, which happened on birthdays specifically because Harry had turned 10 and said, with the careful casualness of someone who wanted something and wasn't sure how to ask for it, that he liked it when Barry cooked. So Barry was making it, and Harry was sitting at the table reading, and the letter arrived through the window because apparently the Hogwarts postal system was not bothered about things like being in America, which Barry found impressive. The owl was enormous and officious and landed on the kitchen table and held out its leg with the expression of an owl who had done this 10,000 times and found every single iteration equally tiresome. Harry looked at the letter. He looked at Barry. He looked at the letter again. "Is this what I think it is?" he said. "Open it," Barry said. Harry opened it. He read it. He put it down. "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry," he said. "Scotland. Yeah. It says my name has been on the roll since birth." He looked up. "That's a bit presumptuous." Barry laughed. He couldn't help it. "Yeah, it kind of is." Harry looked at the letter again. His expression was calm and measuring and Barry could see him running through it, the logistics, the distance, the concept of a boarding school, which they had discussed in the abstract but which was now concrete and dated and addressed to Harry J. Potter in ink that had corrected itself to the Central City address automatically. "Do you want me to go?" Harry said. Barry turned from the stove. "That's not how this works," he said. "I don't make this decision. You do. But do you want me to go?" Barry looked at him for a moment. Harry looked back with the eyes that still got him sometimes, the green, the steadiness, the absolute refusal to accept anything less than an honest answer. "I think you should go if you want to," Barry said carefully. "I think you'd find it interesting and I think you'd do well and I think there are things there you can learn that I can't teach you." He turned back to the stove. "I also think Scotland is further away than I prefer and I'm already working out the logistics of getting there in 12 minutes if something goes wrong." 12 minutes to Scotland? Harry said. "On a good run. Under 10 if I'm motivated." "How motivated do you get?" "Very," Barry said, quietly, and Harry looked at the letter again, and the quiet in the kitchen was the comfortable kind, the kind that had taken years to build and was now solid. "Okay," Harry said. He set the letter on the table and picked his book back up. "I'll go." Barry put the plate of breakfast in front of him, eggs and toast and the slightly overcomplicated hash browns that were his one real cooking accomplishment, and sat across from him, and they ate, and the owl waited impatiently for the reply, and the morning light came through the windows and made the table golden, and the Speed Force hummed through both of them with the warmth of something that had arrived exactly where it was going. The weeks between the letter and September 1st were busy and uncomplicated. The supply list was procured. Cisco had enthusiastically taken on the task of sourcing magical school supplies from London's hidden quarter and had treated it with the energy of a man on the best scavenger hunt of his life. Joe came over for dinner and Harry showed him the letter and Joe read it with the serious attention he gave everything and said, "Well son, they don't know what they're getting themselves into," and the warmth in that son was something Barry watched Harry receive and settle into like he'd been waiting for it. Iris took Harry to King's Cross the week before, just to look at it, so it wasn't completely new territory on the day. They stood on the concourse and Harry looked at the platforms and the people and the specific English station energy and said, with the casual certainty that he'd been using more and more as he grew, as the quietness evolved from a survival instinct into a considered choice, "It's just another place." Iris looked at him. "Places are just places," Harry said. "It's what you do in them." Iris had looked at Barry over Harry's head with an expression he'd seen before, the one that said, "Do you realize what you've raised?" And Barry had looked at his 11-year-old kid with his lightning wand and his speed force heartbeat and his hard-won, absolute, utterly self-possessed certainty, and thought, with a fullness in his chest that was almost too large to fit, "Yeah. I kind of do." September 1st came bright and clear, as though even the weather had decided to make an effort. Harry stood on platform 9 3/4, the crossing of which he'd done at a brisk walk without any drama, giving Barry a brief look that said, "This is actually less strange than my Tuesday mornings," and looked at the Scarlet steam engine with the expression he reserved for things that were going to be good. Not excitement performed for an audience. Just the quiet recognition of something worth being here for. Barry stood next to him with Harry's trunk on a trolley and felt the acute, specific ache of sending someone you loved somewhere you couldn't follow, and said nothing, because the moment didn't need words. Harry turned to him. He was 11 years old and he was going to a boarding school in Scotland to learn magic, and he had the speed force in his cells and lightning in his hands and the absolute confidence of someone who had been loved thoroughly and taught honestly and allowed, without condition or apology, to become exactly who he was. "You'll come for Christmas?" Harry said. "I'll be there before you finish asking," Barry said. Harry nodded. He picked up his backpack, the same one he'd carried through Heathrow 7 years ago, worn and mended and not replaced because he hadn't wanted to replace it, still with the lightning bolt drawn on it in red marker, faded now but visible. He looked at the train. Then he looked at Barry one more time, and the grin appeared, the full one, the crooked and wild and completely unguarded one that had been appearing more and more as the years had passed and the armor had become unnecessary. "Don't worry," Harry said. "Too late," Barry said. Harry laughed, short and real, and picked up the trolley handle and walked toward the train, and the Hogwarts Express whistled once, sharp and clear, and the September morning was all gold light and steam and the smell of London air, and somewhere in the deep physics of it the speed force ran like a river of gold, and the boy who had been found in a cupboard walked onto the train that was going to carry him toward everything else. Barry stood on the platform until the train was out of sight. Then he ran home. He went flat out, faster than he'd gone in years, not because he needed to but because the speed was the thing that connected him most directly to the enormous, wordless feeling in his chest, the speed force roaring with something that wasn't grief and wasn't joy but existed in the country between them. The country of this matters and it's changing and that's right, and all the unnameable feeling of a father watching his kid go. He ran home at the speed of lightning, and the speed force sang, and September 1st settled into history where it belonged. Chapter 3, Platform 9 3/4. The Sorting Hat took one look inside Harry Potter's head and went very quiet. Not the contemplative quiet of a hat doing its job, the other kind, the kind that preceded something unexpected. Harry sat on the 3-legged stool in front of 400 students and waited with his hands in his lap and his eyes open, watching the great hall with the same methodical attention he gave everything new, cataloguing the floating candles and the enchanted ceiling and the 4 long tables and the faces turned toward him. The hat said, in a voice only Harry could hear, "Well. This is unusual." "I get that a lot," Harry thought back. "The speed force," the hat said, less like a question and more like a naturalist naming a specimen. "In a wizard. I've been on 10,000 heads and I have never encountered, the magic in you runs through something else. Something that isn't magic." "It's both," Harry said. "They work together." The hat was quiet again for a moment, and Harry felt it moving through his memories the way you moved through a room, not intrusively, just getting its bearings. It touched the cupboard briefly, withdrew. Touched the airport, the Sunday morning parking lot, the August explosion in the training wing. Touched Joe's dinner table and Iris at the library and the lightning bolt on the backpack. "You're not afraid of anything in this room," the hat said. "Not accusatory. Observational." "There's nothing in this room I should be afraid of," Harry said. Another pause. Most 11-year-olds think differently. Most 11-year-olds haven't run at the speed of sound. The hat made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Gryffindor," it said, with the certainty of something that has just made a very easy decision. "Bravery isn't your most prominent trait, your intelligence and your drive might argue for other houses, but Gryffindor is where you'll make the most of what you are. It's where the fire burns cleanest. A brief pause. Don't let them make you small. I don't do that anymore, Harry said. Gryffindor, the hat announced to the Great Hall. The Gryffindor table erupted. Harry pulled the hat from his head, set it back on the stool with a small nod of thanks that made the hat's brim crinkle in something like appreciation, and walked to the table through the noise. He found a seat near the middle, between a red-haired boy who was clapping with full-body enthusiasm and a brown-haired girl who was clapping with her hands precisely at chest height and her posture very straight. The red-haired boy thrust out a hand. Ron Weasley. The twins are Fred and George at the end, don't believe anything they tell you. Percy's the prefect, he'll tell you himself about 17 times. And that's Ginny in first year too, she's my sister. Harry said. How did you know? The hair, Harry said. And you looked at her the same way you looked at your brothers. Protective. Ron blinked. Right. Yeah. He seemed to recalibrate slightly. What's your name then? Harry Potter. Ron's mouth opened. Then closed. Then, you're serious. Generally, yeah. Everyone's been saying, there was this whole, you're Harry Potter. I'm aware, Harry said pleasantly. Ron stared at him for another beat, processing. Then something shifted in his expression, the celebrity recognition thing deflating into something more straightforward and much more Ron Weasley, which was the honest and direct curiosity of someone who was going to decide what he thought about you based on you and not your reputation. You don't seem bothered by it, he said. Should I be? Ron thought about it genuinely. Probably not, he said. It'd get old pretty quick, I reckon. Being famous for something that happened when you were a baby. That's exactly what it is, Harry said, and Ron grinned, and that was, functionally, that. The brown-haired girl on Harry's other side had been listening to this with the precise attention of someone taking notes. When Harry turned to her she was already turned to him. Hermione Granger, she said. I've read about you. In what? The Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts. Chapter 7. And Great Wizarding Events of the 20th Century, though the account there is less reliable, the sourcing is quite poor, actually. And a History of Magic. She said this the way people mention credentials, efficiently and without apology. Most accounts agree you defeated you-know-who at 15 months. The mechanism is debated. I know, Harry said. I don't know the mechanism either. She looked at him with the particular expression that was, he would learn, Hermione's version of approval, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a fractional forward tilt of the head, the recalibration of initial expectations. Most people who don't know something say they don't know, she said. They don't usually say it like it's something they actually think about. I think about it, Harry said. It happened to me. That got him something fuller, still not a broad smile. Hermione Granger's broad smiles were earned over longer timescales and involved more evidence, but a genuine opening of expression, a decision that said you're someone worth paying attention to. The scar, she said. On your forehead. The readings, she stopped. Sorry. I do tend to jump ahead. What readings? She looked slightly self-conscious in the way of people who had brought up something they weren't sure would be well received. I was running some independent research over the summer. In theory, not practically, there's a branch of magical theory that deals with residual curse signatures, and the killing curse leaves a very specific. She paused again. Looked at him. He was watching her steadily, without impatience, with the listening face that people tended to relax into. The scar should be dormant, she said. Inert. A scar, like any other. But theoretically, with a complete curse deflection rather than an absorption, there might be something. She stopped. Something in the scar, Harry said. Yes. He touched it briefly, instinctively, not nervously, just the way you touched something you were thinking about. I know, he said. It's complicated. She looked at him for a moment. Are you going to tell me how complicated? Maybe. When I know you better. Ron, who had been following this exchange with his chin propped on one hand and the expression of someone watching a very interesting tennis match, said, "That's brilliant, actually, because most boys would just say dunno and that would be that." "I do know," Harry said. "There's a difference." Ron pointed at him. "I like him," he told Hermione. "You've known him for 4 minutes," Hermione said. "I had him in 30 seconds, Ron said, with absolute conviction. "You just take longer." Harry looked between them and thought, these are my people. Not with sentimentality, with the same practical certainty he brought to everything, the assessment of information and the decision that followed it. He had found what he'd come here for before the food had even arrived, and the food arrived, and it was extraordinary, and the evening settled into warmth and noise and the particular alive quality of a large room full of people who were beginning something together. Across the hall, the Slytherin table was quieter. Harry noticed Draco Malfoy the way he noticed most things, peripherally at first, then more directly when the peripheral observation flagged something worth attention. Malfoy was watching him. Not the celebrity gawking that had been happening from various corners of the hall all evening, something sharper, more personal, with the specific edge of someone who had been told to expect something and was finding that the reality didn't match the briefing. They'd met briefly at Madame Malkin's robe shop, 2 weeks ago, during the Diagon Alley trip Cisco had chaperoned with the barely contained energy of a child in the world's most interesting theme park. Malfoy had introduced himself with the confident assumption that the name would produce recognition and the recognition would produce the correct deference, and Harry had looked at him and said, pleasantly, "Nice to meet you," with the exact tone he'd have used to say it to anyone, and Malfoy had looked at him like something had gone slightly off script. Now Malfoy looked at him across the hall, and Harry met the look neutrally, and Malfoy looked away first. Ron noticed. "He tried to shake your hand at the station," Ron said, more quietly now. "After the sorting. I saw." "I know," Harry said. "You didn't shake it." "I noticed whose son he was first," Harry said. "The robes, the attitude, the prefect pin on the older kid with the same jaw. I didn't want to start with a promise I wasn't sure I wanted to keep." Ron stared at him. "You got all that from observation," Harry said. "Also Cisco made me read about the major wizarding families before I came." "For context." "Who's Cisco?" "My dad's best friend," Harry said. The word dad came out naturally, the way it had for a few years now, not performed, not careful, just the right word for the right person. "He's very thorough." "Your dad's a muggle?" Ron asked, without judgment, with just the honest curiosity of someone whose family had a specific relationship with the question. "He can move faster than lightning," Harry said. "Not sure muggle fully covers it." Ron absorbed this with the good grace of someone filing it under interesting and moving forward. "Can you?" he started. "Yes," Harry said. "How fast?" Harry thought about the number on Cisco's speed tracker app, the one Barry had shown him at 7 years old, in the parking lot, after the wall. He thought about the August morning. "Very," he said. Ron looked at him for a moment. "You know, for someone who clearly knows loads, you're not annoying about it." "I try," Harry said. Hermione, who had been following this from the other side with an expression that was increasingly edging towards something that might, on a good day, be called fond, said, "He's going to be insufferable to compete with academically and I've already decided I don't mind." Harry looked at her. "I'm looking forward to it." She held his gaze for a moment, and then she did something he hadn't seen yet. She smiled, not the careful calibrated version but an actual one, brief and bright and completely real, and turned back to her dinner. The first week of classes was a survey, and Harry moved through it with a calm that wasn't indifference. It was the calm of someone who had been paying close attention from the start. Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall, who transformed her desk into a pig and back before anyone had sat down and regarded the class over her spectacles with the look of someone who had no patience for people who were going to waste her time. Potions with Professor Snape, who swept into the dungeon in black robes and regarded Harry with the specific cold intensity of a grievance kept very carefully controlled, and immediately asked him a rapid-fire series of questions about potions theory, bezoars, aconite, the properties of asphodel, apparently designed to establish that Harry Potter's fame was purchased at the expense of actual knowledge. Harry answered all three without hesitation. Snape's expression went through something brief and complex, not pleased, not displeased, more like a hand of cards being quietly reread. He asked a fourth question, more obscure, about the draft of living death. Harry answered that too, and then looked at Snape with the polite attentiveness he'd been maintaining throughout and said nothing else, and Snape turned away with a precision that was possibly the most controlled version of HM that Harry had ever witnessed. "How did you know all that?" Hermione asked afterward, with the tone of someone asking for professional reasons. "I read the textbook," Harry said. "Front to back. In July." She stared at him. "So did I," she said. "I know," Harry said. "I could tell. You gave the answers in the order they appear in the chapter." A pause. "Then, I did," she said, slowly. "I hadn't noticed that." "You'll adjust," he said. It was impressive regardless. She studied him for a moment, visibly recalculating something. "You're going to be my intellectual nemesis," she said, in a tone that had decided to be positive about this. "Or your most useful ally," Harry suggested. She considered this. "Both," she said, and walked into class. The first flying lesson was the moment things became generally known. It was on a Thursday afternoon, grey and brisk, the Quidditch pitch wide and green and smelling of cut grass and the particular approaching rain smell that Harry's body had stored from Privet Drive and now associated with something very different than it used to. Madame Hooch ran the class with the brisk competence of someone for whom broomsticks were neither exciting nor mysterious but were still worth teaching properly, and everyone mounted up, and she told them to kick off gently and hover at 3 feet. Everyone mostly managed this, with varying degrees of terror. Neville Longbottom, bless him, went immediately vertical, broom jerking skyward despite every instruction to the contrary, and his wand fell from his pocket and hit the ground and cracked, and Neville went 20 feet up with the white face of someone who had made a catastrophic calculation error, and then the broom threw him and he came down. He would be fine. His wrist would need the hospital wing, and his pride needed longer, but he would be fine. It was the marble-sized remembrall that rolled from Neville's pocket as Madame Hooch carried him away, small and pale in the grass, that created the situation. Draco Malfoy saw the opportunity with the quick comprehension of someone who had been waiting for one, swooped down, picked it up, and rose to about 20 feet, holding it with the studied carelessness of someone performing casual. "I'll leave it somewhere for him to find," Malfoy said, to no one in particular and the audience in general. "Maybe up a tree." Harry had been watching from his broom, hovering at exactly 3 feet as instructed, because he'd been paying attention and Madame Hooch had been specific. He watched Malfoy with the neutral expression he wore when he was waiting to see whether a situation resolved itself or required input. "Give it back, Malfoy," Ron said from beside him, which Harry appreciated for its directness. Malfoy looked at Ron with the cordial contempt of someone who had filed Ron Weasley under not relevant and had no intention of revisiting that classification. Then he looked at Harry. Something in his expression sharpened, a challenge that had been waiting since the sorting, since the robe shop, since whatever conversation Malfoy had had with his father that had set his expectations for this encounter. "Come and get it, then," Malfoy said. "Unless the famous Harry Potter is worried about the height." The class was watching. Harry felt the watching the way he always felt rooms, as information rather than pressure. He looked at the remembrall. He looked at Draco Malfoy, 20 feet up, with the confidence of someone who was good on a broom and knew it. He thought about Barry, who had never once in 11 years told him that showing off was bad, but who had taught him something more useful, that the only performance worth giving was the honest one. Harry kicked off. He didn't accelerate gradually. He went from 3 feet to Malfoy's altitude in a time that was not achievable on a standard school broom without the speed force adding something to the equation, and Malfoy barely had time to register the movement before Harry was in front of him, eye level, close enough that the surprise on Malfoy's face was entirely legible. "The Remembrall," Harry said, pleasantly. Malfoy's hand tightened around it reflexively, and then something happened in his face, the rapid calculation of someone who had gone for a gamble and was suddenly uncertain of the odds. He looked at Harry's face. He looked at the broom. He looked at whatever it was in Harry's expression that was not aggressive and not afraid and not asking permission, just waiting, with the complete certainty of someone who already knew how this ended. Malfoy threw the Remembrall at him, hard, sideways, at an angle designed to make it uncatchable. Harry's hand moved. The Remembrall was in his palm, and the entire motion of catching it had happened in the window between one of Malfoy's blinks and the next. Harry looked at the Remembrall. He looked back at Malfoy. "Thanks," he said, and turned his broom and dropped back to the ground and landed as lightly as if he'd stepped off a curb. The class was completely silent. Hermione had her hand over her mouth. Ron was grinning with his whole face. Malfoy came down slowly, with the careful control of someone managing an expression. "That," said a voice from the edge of the pitch, "was the most natural flying I've seen since Charlie Weasley." Professor McGonagall was standing at the gate. She was looking at Harry with the expression of someone who is trying very hard to be stern and is winning, but only barely. She gave him a look that said "my office," now in the language of professorial eyebrows, and Harry handed the Remembrall to Ron and walked over. She put him on the Gryffindor Quidditch team that afternoon. Seeker. The youngest in a century, and the first year allowed a broom in a century, and Oliver Wood, the Gryffindor captain, received this information with the stunned joy of someone being told they'd won something they hadn't entered a competition for. Harry came back to the common room with the Nimbus 2000 under his arm, and Ron grabbed him immediately, and Hermione said, "You could have been expelled," and Harry said, "I wasn't going to be expelled," with such certainty that she stopped mid-lecture. "How did you know?" she demanded. "McGonagall's expression when she called me over," Harry said. "She was working very hard not to smile." "People who are about to expel you don't have to work to not smile." Hermione stared at him. Ron made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a wheeze. "That is either brilliant or terrifying," Hermione said. "Both," Harry said, and went to put the broom away. The school settled into rhythm around him. He found that Hogwarts was, more than anything else, interesting, not in the way that anywhere impressive was interesting, but in the way a living system was interesting, the way it had internal logic and history and currents that you could map if you paid attention. He paid attention. He paid attention to the way the staircases moved, which he treated as an optimization problem. He paid attention to the portraits, who talked freely if you addressed them properly. He paid attention to the staff, who were individually more complex than their classroom presentation suggested, Flitwick with his championship dueling past, Sprout with the particular kindness of someone who trusted plants because plants didn't require the same things from you, McGonagall with the iron exterior built around something more susceptible that she protected without advertise. And he paid attention to Quirrell. It wasn't the stutter, which was practiced, Harry realized within the first week, in the way that performance was practiced, with the slight overconsistency of someone maintaining a character rather than the natural variation of an actual nervous condition. It wasn't the smell, though the smell was wrong, a wrongness that sat at the edge of his awareness like a sound slightly below hearing. It was the way Quirrell looked at him. Not with celebrity recognition, not with professional assessment, but with the deep, personal interest of something that had been waiting for him specifically. Harry said nothing about it to anyone for 3 weeks, which was the time it took him to be certain. On a Wednesday evening in early October, sitting in the Gryffindor common room with Hermione working through charms theory across the table from him and Ron attempting a chess problem beside the fire, Harry said, "There's something wrong with Quirrell." Ron looked up. Hermione's quill paused. "Wrong how?" Hermione said. "The stutter is performed," Harry said. "He smells of something, not bad exactly, more like ozone but wrong. Not speed force. Something else. And he looks at me like he's waiting for something." Hermione put her quill down. "You can smell the speed force?" It smells like lightning, Harry said. Like before a storm. This is different, older. Darker. Have you told a teacher? I don't know enough yet, Harry said. Telling a teacher is for when you know what you're telling them. He looked at the fire. I want to know what he's guarding first. What he's guarding? Ron said. On the 3rd floor, Harry said. There's something on the 3rd floor corridor. The whole castle has an energy signature, it's layered, like rings, older at the center. But the 3rd floor has a different signature on top of the main one. Something recent. Something brought in. Ron and Hermione looked at each other. You can feel the castle, Hermione said, and it wasn't really a question. I can feel most things if I pay attention, Harry said. The speed force it's in everything that moves. Heat, electricity, kinetics. Old stone doesn't move much but it still has a signature. The thing on the 3rd floor moves. What kind of thing moves and lives on a 3rd floor corridor? Ron said. I have a theory, Harry said. The theory involved the break-in at Gringotts Vault 713 the previous July. Cisco had flagged it, because Cisco flagged everything in the magical world that made the news, because Cisco had approached the existence of the magical world as the most interesting research project of his life and was comprehensive about it. The vault had been emptied the same day Harry and Cisco had visited Diagon Alley. Harry had connected the timeline eventually. Something was in that vault, Harry said. Something they moved. Something important enough to hide at a school. Why a school? Ron said. Because who, Harry said, is going to look for something important at a school? Hermione looked at him for a long moment. You figured all of this out. Some of it, Harry said. I'm still working on the rest. You've been sitting on this for 3 weeks, she said. Without telling anyone. I'm telling you now, Harry said. She was quiet for a moment, and something moved in her expression, the thing he'd noticed about her early on, that under the precision and the evidence-based framework and the comprehensive preparation, Hermione Granger was someone who cared intensely about the right things, and when she decided you were one of the right things, she brought the full force of that caring with her. All right, she said. She picked up her quill and turned to a clean page. Tell me everything. I love this, Ron said, to no one in particular. We've not even been here 2 months and we've already got a conspiracy. This is brilliant. Harry looked at him. I mean, possibly very dangerous and also brilliant, Ron corrected, and Harry smiled, and Hermione wrote, and the fire crackled and the October night pressed against the castle windows and the speed force hummed through Harry's fingers and into the stone of the very old building around them, feeling out the shape of the thing they were going to have to face. In November, the troll happened. Harry had been trying to get to Hermione's location from the moment Quirrell burst into the Great Hall and announced the troll in the dungeon with the specific dramatic energy of a man delivering news he'd already decided the outcome of, but the subsequent chaos of 500 students being evacuated in 4 directions at once had interposed 30 seconds of pure crowd physics between him and the route to the girls' bathroom where Hermione was, by the timeline he'd been running in his head. Almost certainly located. He got there in under 20 seconds. He didn't run at full speed inside the castle, not because he was hiding it, but because at full speed inside stone corridors the air displacement alone would cause structural problems, so he went at the speed he'd internally classified as fast enough to be invisible, slow enough not to break anything. He got to the girls' bathroom on the 2nd floor and the door was already wrecked, the Trolls Club having made authoritative acquaintance with it, and inside Hermione was backed into the far corner of the room with the expression of someone who is extremely frightened and is applying every available cognitive resource to the question of what do I do about this rather than wasting any of those resources on simply being frightened. The troll was 12 feet of grey mountain muscle with a very large club and approximately the threat assessment capability of a particularly confident rock. Ron came through the door behind Harry at a sprint, breathing hard, slightly pink, wielding his wand with the grip of someone who had absolutely a plan and was working on what the plan was as he went. Harry looked at the troll for 2 seconds. The troll raised its club. Harry was behind it before the club completed its downswing. He went there not with his full speed, something borrowed, something measured, the speed force answering his intention the way it always did now, cleanly and without excess, and the troll swung and hit nothing and the momentum spun it 3/4 around, confused, searching for the thing that had been in front of it. It found Harry behind it instead. He didn't use his wand. He put one hand on the troll's left knee and pushed, not physically, not with muscle, and the electrical potential he'd been building in his palm discharged through the troll's nervous system with the focused precision of a man who had spent years learning the difference between more and enough. The troll sat down with the gracelessness of a very large creature whose legs had just received an urgent message that they needed to stop working, and it sat down heavily enough that the floor shook, and the club fell, and the troll blinked at the ceiling with the bewildered expression of someone whose operational plan had been comprehensively interrupted. Harry stepped away from it. The bathroom was very quiet. Hermione was staring at him. Ron was staring at him. "Is it dead?" Ron said. "Unconscious," Harry said. "It'll wake up in about 10 minutes. He looked at Hermione. "Are you all right?" She looked at him, and she looked at the troll, and she looked at her own hands, and then she looked back at him. "You moved," she said. "I saw you move and then I didn't see you move and you were somewhere else." "Yeah," Harry said. "How fast are you exactly?" she said. "It varies," Harry said. "Depending on what I need." She stared at him. "Then, I have so many questions." "I know," Harry said. "We should probably get the teachers first." "Right," she said. "Yes. Obviously." She straightened up with the particular resolute composure of Hermione Granger deciding to process extraordinary things in an orderly sequence rather than all at once. "Right. Teachers first." "For what it's worth," Ron said, still looking at the unconscious troll with wide eyes, "that was the most mental thing I've ever seen and I grew up in a house with Fred and George." Harry looked at the troll. He looked at Ron. "We should probably have a story," he said. "She was crying in the bathroom," Ron said immediately. "We came to get her." The troll followed. "I levitated the club, Wingardium Leviosa, the one Flitwick taught us, and knocked it out." He looked at Hermione. "If that's all right." Hermione looked between them. Something moved across her face that was more than the composed pragmatism she usually presented, something warmer and more raw and less architecturally designed. Yes. That works." She paused. "Thank you. Both of you." "What I did," Harry said, "the teachers can't explain anyway. Better they think Ron floored it with a charm." Ron puffed up slightly. "It was a good charm," he said. "It was an excellent charm," Harry agreed. By the time the teachers arrived, they had the story straight, and McGonagall gave Ron 5 points for the charm and gave Hermione 10 points for presence of mind and gave Harry 5 points for leadership, and Percy Weasley, who had arrived with the staff, looked at the unconscious troll and then at his brother and said something that was meant to be parental and landed as proud, and the three of them walked back to Gryffindor Tower together through the castle's quiet corridors. Hermione walked on Harry's left. She didn't say anything for most of the walk. Then, just before the portrait hole, she said, quietly, "The speed force. It's not just running, is it?" "No," Harry said. "It's in the magic too," she said. "They're the same thing, for me," Harry said. "I can't really separate them." She was quiet for a moment, processing, slotting it into the framework she was building. "Then, I'd like to understand it, if you'd be willing. Properly. Theoretically. I won't write it down without your permission." Harry looked at her. The earnestness of her, the genuine, uncomplicated desire to understand rather than to have information, the difference between those two things being enormous and Hermione being on the right side of it, landed in him as something solid. "Yeah," he said. "I'd like that." Ron opened the portrait hole. The common room was warm and loud with the aftermath of the troll evacuation, everyone talking at once, and the three of them walked in together and the portrait swung shut behind them, and somewhere in the castle the troll woke up confused in a bathroom, and somewhere deeper in the castle something on the third floor pulsed darkly, and Harry felt the speed force move through him like a breath taken before something important, like a preparation. December came. Harry sat in the window of the Gryffindor Tower and looked out at the snow on the grounds and thought about Quirrell. He was thinking about Quirrell constantly now, not with anxiety but with the focused attention of someone who has identified a variable and is waiting for it to fully resolve. The smell had been getting stronger. The way Quirrell looked at the back of the room space had been shifting, becoming inward rather than outward, as though he were listening to something. Harry had done 3 circuits of the third-floor corridor at 4 in the morning when the castle was as close to empty as it got, and he'd felt the thing on the floor, the deep, ancient guardian magic of it, and something else, something that had noticed him noticing it. Christmas arrived and Barry arrived slightly before it, stepping through the Hogsmeade side entrance that Cisco had, through means Barry described as "I genuinely do not want to know," arranged legitimate access to. Harry met him on the steps of the castle in the December snow and Barry hugged him with the full-body thoroughness of a man who had been running calculations about travel distances to Scotland for 3 months, and Harry hugged him back and let himself be 11 for a moment, genuinely and completely. "You look taller," Barry said. "By 2 centimeters," Harry said. "I measured." "Of course you did." Barry held him at arm's length and looked at him. "How are you actually?" "Good," Harry said, and meant it, which was the best version of fine, the one that didn't need inspection. "There's something I need to tell you about." Barry looked at his face. "How serious?" "Medium," Harry said. "Working on it." Barry looked at the castle, at the lit windows and the snow on the turrets and the enormous quality of the thing against the grey December sky. "Nice place," he said. "It is," Harry agreed. "There might be a fragment of Voldemort on the 3rd floor." Barry turned to look at him. "I said medium," Harry said. "Medium," Barry repeated. "I have a plan." "Of course you do." Barry put his arm around Harry's shoulders and they turned back toward the castle doors. "Tell me the plan." Harry told him. The snow fell. The speed force hummed between them like a conversation that didn't need words. And inside the castle the thing on the 3rd floor pulsed, dark and patient, waiting for spring. Chapter 4, The Philosopher's Stone. Spring came to Hogwarts the way it always did, not gradually but in a single decisive morning when the frost was simply gone and the ground smelled like mud and possibility. Harry noticed it on the 1st of April and thought, with the particular dark humor he'd been developing since December, that the timing was appropriate. He'd been watching Quirrell deteriorate. That was the right word for it. Over the months since Christmas it had been a slow process. The way would deteriorated near water, not dramatically, not all at once, but with a steady yielding of structural integrity that you didn't notice day to day until you stepped back and compared what you were looking at now against what it had been. Quirrell's hands shook sometimes. The practiced stutter was less consistent. He stood at the edges of rooms differently, with the specific stillness of someone sharing their body with something that had its own preferred posture. Harry knew because he'd felt similar things, not the same thing, never the same thing, but the speed force was in everything kinetic and Voldemort's presence in Quirrell changed the way Quirrell moved at the molecular level, and Harry had been paying close enough attention for long enough that he could read the change the way you read weather from barometric pressure. He told Hermione and Ron on a Thursday evening in April, when the 3 of them had the common room mostly to themselves and the fire was burning low and orange. "He's going to move soon," Harry said. Hermione looked up from her notes. She had 8 feet of parchment spread across the table, independent research, cross-referencing the 3rd floor guardians they'd identified against known protective enchantment frameworks, a project she'd been building since October. "What makes you say soon?" "He's running out of time," Harry said. "Whatever Voldemort needs from whatever's on the 3rd floor, and I think it's the Philosopher's Stone." Hermione didn't flinch. She never flinched at the name because Harry used it without drama and she'd adopted that practice, and Ron had followed Hermione. "It needs to happen before the end of term." After summer Dumbledore will move it somewhere else, or the situation will change. He has a window and it's closing. Ron had the chessboard in front of him but he hadn't moved a piece in 20 minutes. How do you know about the stone? He said. Nicholas Flamel, Harry said. Hermione found the reference. Hermione nodded. Alchemist. 665 years old. The stone produces the elixir of life. She paused. If someone who was currently existing as a wraith needed a physical form, he'd need the elixir, Harry said. Or the stone itself. Ron looked between them. So what's the plan? The plan was straightforward, which was how Harry liked plans. He'd been working on it since Christmas, refining it through February and March as his understanding of the third floor's protections had developed. He'd felt out each guardian, the three-headed dog, which was magical in the way large dangerous animals were magical, alive and present and manageable, the devil's snare, which Hermione had a complete botanical profile on, the enchanted keys, which were a speed problem and therefore not a problem, the chessboard, which was Ron's domain and he knew it without being told, the troll, which had been replaced after November, the final logic puzzle, which Hermione had already solved on paper 3 times. And the mirror. He'd felt the mirror from the corridor. It was the deepest reading in the whole sequence, the oldest magic in the building after the castle's own foundations, desire magic, the kind that worked on what you wanted most. It was also the thing Quirrell/Voldemort couldn't pass, because what Voldemort wanted most was the stone and desire magic was specifically designed to refuse people who wanted to use rather than find. Harry had spent 3 weeks thinking about what he wanted most, because knowing your own answer to that question before it was asked of you seemed like basic preparation. If he moves, Ron said, we go in first. We go in first, Harry agreed. The teachers should know, Hermione said, for the third time since October, which meant she was saying it because the logic required her to say it rather than because she actually thought it would resolve anything. She'd developed a picture of Dumbledore over the months, from the books she'd read, from the patterns she'd observed, that had given her complicated feelings about the category of adult authority in a position to help. Dumbledore knows the stone is there, Harry said. He chose to keep it here. If I tell him someone is going to steal it, the most likely outcome is that he does something that changes the situation in ways I can't predict. I'd rather control the variables. Hermione looked at him. That's a very 11-year-old thing to say in a very not 11-year-old way. Is that a problem? She considered. No, she said. It's just occasionally alarming how much sense you make. It happened on the 14th of June. Harry felt it at 11 at night, the thing on the third floor shifting, something changing in the pattern of it the way the feel of a crowd changed when it started moving in a direction. He was awake because he'd been awake every night since April, sleeping in 4-hour stretches and running a check on the castle's energy patterns during the gaps, which was not the most restful system but was effective. He sat up in the dark dormitory, the speed force already awake in him, the way it was always awake when it was needed, and pulled on his clothes and picked up his wand and went to wake Ron. Ron woke the way he always woke when Harry did it, eyes open, immediate, already sitting up, which spoke to a relationship with night readiness that probably said something about growing up with Fred and George. He dressed in 30 seconds without being told. They got Hermione, who was already awake and already dressed, standing in the corridor outside the girls' dormitory with her notes rolled under one arm and her wand in her other hand and the expression of someone who had been ready for this specific moment for 8 months. He went in, she said. I felt the castle shift. The third floor ward changed about 5 minutes ago. Harry nodded. Let's go. They moved through the castle with the quiet efficiency of people who had rehearsed this route in various ways over several months. Harry had done it at speed alone twice, mapping it, and they'd walked it together enough times that the turns were muscle memory. The third floor corridor was dark and still. The door at the end was open, the lock broken, and through it the three-headed dog lay asleep on the trapdoor, Quirrell's work preceding them. Harry stepped over its enormous flank without looking particularly concerned. The trapdoor was open. He dropped through first. Devil's snare caught him and found nothing to work with. The speed force responded to the plant's grip by vibrating his cells at a frequency that made him as difficult to hold as water, and he was through it in seconds and standing on the dark floor below, one hand up to slow Hermione's descent with a carefully directed kinetic pulse that set her down gently. Ron dropped through and dealt with the snare the way they'd planned, the incendiary charm Hermione had prepared on a piece of parchment, lit in 3 seconds. The keys were next, a vast wheeling flock of them in a chamber full of brooms. Harry stepped to the center of the room, looked up, and did nothing for 2 seconds. He was reading the room the way he read everything, not visually but electromagnetically, the faint metallic signatures of several hundred keys, the one among them with the slightly different electrical profile of a thing that had been used recently, touched by magic with the specific intent of a lock. He found it in the upper left of the flock, slightly bent in one wing, moving in a small irregular orbit that distinguished it from the rest. He stepped into the speed force and went up. He was back on the ground with the key in 40 seconds, total. He hadn't used a broom. Hermione had stopped trying to calculate exactly how he moved through the speed force and had started simply recording results, which was a scientific maturity she was probably a few years ahead of schedule for. That was efficient, she said. The brooms were there for someone else's version of this problem, Harry said. The chess room was Ron's. Ron stood at the edge of the board and looked at it with the expression he wore at chess and only at chess, stripped of the easy humor and the comfortable loudness, quiet and focused and completely in his element. The pieces were human-sized and fully physical and waiting. Ron said, "I need to be the knight," and walked onto the board without a backward glance, and Harry and Hermione took their assigned pieces, and Ron played. He was extraordinary at it. Harry knew this, had played against Ron enough times to appreciate the quality of his mind when it was on a chessboard, the way he saw spatial relationships and probability cascades and the architecture of a game all at once. He sacrificed his own piece with the calm precision of someone who had worked out 4 moves before that it was necessary, and the queen struck him and he went down, and Harry felt the speed force surge hot in his chest and made himself hold still because Ron had calculated the sacrifice and it was the right play, and interfering with the right play because it was hard to watch was not something Ron had asked for. Ron went down. The path opened. "Go," Ron said from the floor, already checking himself over with the focused efficiency of someone who has taken a hit and needs to know the damage before he can plan around it. "Not badly hurt. Bruised, possibly a rib. Go." "I'm fine." "Go." Hermione looked at him. Something raw moved in her face. "I'll stay," she said. "I'll make sure he's," Hermione, Ron said, with the directness that was his specific gift, the ability to say the important thing simply and without the performance of saying it. "Go with Harry." She went. The troll was already down, defeated before they arrived, which Harry filed under Quirrell getting here ahead of us and moved through without stopping. The fire room was the potion puzzle, and Hermione solved it in 90 seconds, not because she was showing off, but because she'd solved it on paper 3 times and the physical version matched her model precisely, which was the particular satisfaction of preparation meeting reality. She turned with the smallest bottle in her hand. "There's only enough for one," she said. "I know," Harry said. "Harry, I know." He looked at her. "Go back to Ron. Get out of the castle and get to a fireplace and Fleur Colberry." He'd given her the connection details in February. "His number in the Fleur network is in the notebook I gave you." She looked at him. The earnestness of her, the realness of her worry, was something he received without deflecting. He didn't tell her it was fine, didn't minimize it, just looked back at her steadily and let her see that he meant it. "You know what you're doing," she said. It was somewhere between a question and a decision to believe something. "I know what I'm doing," he said. She handed him the bottle. She looked at him for one more second, the full, comprehensive look of someone committing something to memory, and then she turned to the fire and walked through it and was gone. Harry looked at the last door. He drank the potion. The cold rushed through him, the particular cold of fire-defying magic, and he stepped through. The room on the other side was dark and warm and smelled wrong. The mirror of Eriste stood against the far wall, enormous and ornate, its surface dark. And in front of it, with his back to the door, stood Professor Quirrell. "I knew you'd come," Quirrell said. His voice was different. No stutter. The cultivated nervousness entirely gone, the performance packed away since it was no longer needed. He turned, and his face was the face Harry had been watching deteriorate all year, but it was also something else now, something that wore Quirrell the way you wore a coat, with the careless proprietary ease of ownership. "You've been watching me all year," Quirrell said. He seemed genuinely curious about this in the detached way of someone who finds their own situation academically interesting. "Yes," Harry said. "You're not afraid?" "No." "Why not?" Again, genuinely curious. "Not threatening. Testing." "Because being afraid of you doesn't help anything," Harry said. "And because I'm better at this than you expected." Quirrell looked at him. "You are," he said, with the acknowledgement of someone who respects a fact regardless of whether they like it. "The Dark Lord said you would be different." "He didn't say how different." He tilted his head slightly. "You can feel him, can't you?" "In me?" "Yes," Harry said. "He smells like ozone that's gone wrong." Something behind Quirrell's eyes moved. "Not Quirrell. The other thing." "Show me your hands," that other thing said, through Quirrell's mouth, and the voice was different enough that Harry didn't pretend it was Quirrell anymore. Harry opened his hands. Palms up. The white gold lightning moved between his fingers in the quiet way it did when he was calm, not performing, not threatening, just present. Voldemort, wearing Quirrell, looked at Harry Potter's hands for a long moment. "Speed Force," Voldemort said. The word sounded strange in his borrowed voice, like a term from a language he didn't speak. "I felt it on you the night I failed. I have thought about it for 10 years. His tone was the tone of a very intelligent being discussing a variable that has never been fully resolved. "The magic that killed my body came from your mother. But the thing that deflected the curse, that turned it back, was something else. Something that ran through the connection between us and said no." "The Speed Force," Harry said. "The Speed Force," Voldemort agreed. "And now it's in you, fully. Not borrowed. Not partial. It was always mine," Harry said. "We worked on it." "You were raised by the Flash," Voldemort said, and something in how he said it, the slight weight on it, communicated that this had been discovered and reconsidered many times over the past 10 years. "A man who runs between moments. What an extraordinary accident." "It wasn't an accident," Harry said. A pause. "No," Voldemort said, after a moment, and the agreement was the most dangerous thing he'd said yet because it was honest. "I don't believe it was either." He turned slightly toward the mirror. "The stone is in that mirror. I can't reach it. The magic is resistant to my wanting." "But I'm not getting the stone for you," Harry said. "You might find," Voldemort said, with the patient tone of someone who has made this argument before in various iterations and knows which formulations are most effective, "that I can offer you things that matter to you. Your parents, for instance." Lily Potter's face. A pause. James Potter's laugh. "I was there for both of those. I remember them more clearly than most because I was looking so directly at them when they ended." The Speed Force in Harry went absolutely still. This was the thing that could reach him. Not fear, not physical danger, not threat, but the specific shape of the absence he carried. He had known this about himself for years, had thought about it carefully, had mapped the edges of it with the precision he brought to everything, precisely because he hadn't wanted it to be a surprise when someone tried to use it. Voldemort was watching his face. "I'm not going to pretend that doesn't affect me," Harry said. His voice was steady. "I'm not built like that." "It does." But there's a difference," Harry said, "between something affecting you and something controlling you." He looked at Quirrell's face, at the thing behind it, with the direct and unperformative attention he'd looked at everything since he was 4 years old on a cot in a cupboard deciding whether a new person was safe. My parents died protecting me. The thing you're offering, using their faces as a lever to get me to help you, they'd hate that. They'd hate it specifically and personally. That matters to me. Quirrell moved toward him. Harry stepped back, not away but sideways, not retreating, repositioning. The speed force woke up fully, the way it went from warm background hum to active current, and the white gold lightning ran from his hands to his forearms and the temperature in the room went up 4 degrees. Don't, Harry said. Quirrell stopped. The thing in him recalculated. The mirror, Voldemort said again. You want to find it and keep it safe, don't you? That's your nature, you're not here to use it, you're here to prevent its use. That desire is pure enough that the mirror would give it to you. Harry thought about this. He thought about what he wanted most, the question he'd been sitting with since December. He thought about Barry in the parking lot running alongside him. He thought about Joe's dinner table. He thought about Iris at the library and Cisco in the workshop and Ron on the chessboard and Hermione's 8 feet of notes. He thought, what do I want most? He walked to the mirror. He stood in front of it and looked at his reflection. The surface was dark, smoky, and then it resolved, not his reflection exactly, but a version of him, older, still holding the same wand, and in the reflection's hand was a small red stone. He felt something drop into his actual hand. He closed his fingers around it. The real stone. In his actual hand. He'd wanted to find it and protect it, to keep it from use, and the mirror had given it to him because the desire was exactly right. He had no intention of using it, had in fact never wanted it less than in the moment he was holding it. He turned around. Quirrell was watching with the absolute focused attention of a predator that has located what it wants. Give me the stone, Voldemort said. No, Harry said. Quirrell lunged. Harry moved. The speed force answered with the immediate completeness it always did now, not a channel he opened but a state he moved into, like stepping from shallow water into deep, and the world went to the particular extended moment quality of maximum speed, everything slowed to fractions, Quirrell's motion elongated and readable, the room entirely available. He went to Quirrell's left side and hit him with a flat-palmed strike to the shoulder, not a punch, not violent, just enough kinetic force to spin him and break the momentum of the lunge, and the discharge of speed force through the contact point lit up the room white gold for a second and Quirrell went sideways hard and hit the wall and slid down it. Harry was 3 meters away by the time Quirrell hit the wall. Quirrell pushed himself up, and his face was wrong, the turban coming loose, the carefully maintained presentation fracturing, and at the back of his head where the turban had covered there was a face that wasn't Quirrell's. A face Harry had seen once in photographs in Cisco's files. Pale and flat and with red eyes and the flat-nosed absence of something that had surrendered too much of itself over too many years to the particular hunger it had built its whole existence around. Impressive, Voldemort said, from the back of Quirrell's head, in his real voice, which was nothing like the voice he'd been using. His real voice was quiet and precise and cold in the way that very deep water was cold, not aggressively, just absolutely. You're faster than I modeled for. Even knowing what you were. You modeled for me. Harry said. I've had 10 years with little to do, Voldemort said. I've thought about you extensively. What you might become. What leverage points you might have. What would stop you? A pause. I modeled incorrectly on several counts. Which ones? You're not afraid of dying, Voldemort said. Most people fear death above all things. It is the foundation of most leverage. But you, something that might have been genuine curiosity moved in the red eyes, you run faster than everything. Including, possibly, death. Does that make it less frightening or more? Neither, Harry said. I just don't think about it the way you do. How do I think about it? Like it's the worst thing, Harry said. Like it's the enemy. But it's not, it's just what happens at the end, and what matters is what you put in the middle. He looked at Quirrell's face, at the thing behind it. You made yourself immortal and you lost your body doing it. You've spent 10 years as a parasite. The stone would give you a body back. And then what? More of the same. More of this. He gestured at the room, the mirror, the situation. You've spent your whole life running from death and it's left you with nothing worth having. Voldemort's red eyes didn't change. You're 11 years old, he said. I know, Harry said. But Barry's been telling me this since I was 7 and the math holds up. A pause. Then, Barry Allen, Voldemort said, and the name came out with more weight than any of the other words. The man who runs between moments. Does he know that's what he does? That the speed force is, not just speed, not just kinetics, but time, at the margins? That he runs in the gaps between moments rather than through them? We've had the conversation, Harry said. Does he know what you are? What you'll become, specifically, with both? He knows enough, Harry said. He doesn't need the rest. I, Voldemort said, very quietly, could tell you the rest. What you are. The full shape of it. No one else alive knows the theory, I've had 10 years to develop it and no one to tell. Harry looked at Quirrell's face. The stone was warm in his closed hand, warming further, the desire magic in it recognizing that its holder had good intentions and responding accordingly. You're trying to make yourself interesting to me, Harry said. Is it working? A little, Harry admitted. But not enough. Quirrell's hands came up and the curse hit the air where Harry had been standing, dark purple and fast enough that most people wouldn't have had time to process it had been cast. Harry was already elsewhere, not running, something more subtle than running, the speed force moving him between the spell's arrival and where he'd been with the smoothness of a very well-practiced reflex. He let the second one go over his shoulder. The third he caught. Not physically, you didn't catch curses physically, Hermione had told him that with the vehemence of someone who considered this an important safety point. But he caught the kinetic tail of it, the speed force reading the physical component of the magical projectile, and redirected it 30 degrees left into the mirror's frame, where it hit the stone surround and discharged in a shower of dark sparks that did nothing useful to anyone. Quirrell stared at him. You caught a curse, Voldemort said. Redirected, Harry corrected. That's, a pause, that is not theoretically possible. Tell that to the mirror frame, Harry said. Quirrell's body moved again, different this time, faster, no wand, physical movement, and Harry recognized that Voldemort had taken more direct control because Quirrell's speed was suddenly wrong, too fast for a human body, the kind of fast that broke things but didn't care. He came at Harry with both hands and Harry went sideways and then under and came up inside the reach, and the contact happened. Both hands on Quirrell's chest. The speed force in Harry and the dark magic in Quirrell and the fragment of Voldemort's soul braided through it all, and they met. The speed force made a decision. Harry felt it happen from the inside, felt it decide, with the complete certainty of something that had never been uncertain, that what was in Quirrell was incompatible with what the speed force was, that the presence of Voldemort's soul fragment in a living person was a corruption of the kinetic life force that ran through everything, and the speed force was not interested in accommodating corruption. It didn't burn. It was more like light through something that couldn't tolerate light. Quirrell's hands where they gripped Harry's arms began to crack, to pale, to crumble at the edges the way old paper crumbled when you handled it wrong. Quirrell screamed, and the scream was two voices, and Harry gripped his chest and held on because letting go felt like the wrong choice and the speed force agreed. The white gold lightning ran the full circuit of both of them and Quirrell's face went through a rapid sequence of expressions none of which were Quirrell, and the thing behind the red eyes looked at Harry in the last second with something that might have been several things, fury, calculation, and somewhere underneath those, something older and more honest and possibly afraid in the way that it had never expected to be afraid of something 11 years old. This isn't over, Voldemort said. I know, Harry said. But it is for tonight. Quirrell crumbled. Harry stood in the room with the dust of what had been Quirrell settling around his feet and the stone in his closed fist and the white gold lightning dissipating slowly from his hands, and the speed force went quiet the way it went quiet after something big, not gone, just returned to the background hum of its normal register, warm and present and satisfied. He opened his hand and looked at the stone. Small. Red. Warm. He thought about what Barry had said once, in the STR Labs workshop, when Harry was about 9 and they were talking about what the Speed Force was for, why it had chosen Barry, why it seemed to have an opinion about things. Barry had said, not with certainty, just with the thinking out loud quality he had when he was working through something honestly, I think it wants things to be right. Not perfect, just right. It shows up when something's gone wrong and needs correcting. The stone in his hand was warm with desire magic. Harry put it in his pocket. He walked to the door and through the troll chamber and the potion chamber, and up through the chessboard where Ron was still on the floor and had gotten himself to a sitting position and looked at Harry with the direct, uncomplicated assessment of someone waiting for a status report. Done. Ron said. Done, Harry said. Quirrell. Gone, Harry said. Not dead. Dispersed, maybe. It's complicated. Ron nodded. Hermione got out. I told her to. I assume she did what I said. Ron grinned. 50-50, he said. Harry helped him up, and Ron's arm went over Harry's shoulder, and they moved back up through the trapdoor, careful with Ron's ribs, back through the sleeping dog, back through the door and into the third-floor corridor. Barry was standing in the corridor. Harry stopped. Barry looked at him, the full assessment, head to toe, the one that read damage and condition and well-being the way a diagnostician read a chart. His expression did several things in rapid sequence and settled on something that was trying to be calm and was mostly succeeding. Hermione called, he said. I figured, Harry said. You've got dust on you. That's Quirrell, Harry said. Right. Barry's jaw worked slightly. Are you? I'm fine, Harry said. Ron needs the hospital wing. I have the stone. He pulled it from his pocket and held it up between them in the third-floor corridor he glanced at his watch, 12:43 in the morning, the corridor lit by the ambient glow of his own residual lightning. It needs to be somewhere safer than this. Barry looked at the stone. He looked at Harry. I'm going to need a minute, Barry said, with the tone of someone who meant it literally. Take 2, Harry said. Barry turned away. Harry watched his back, the set of his shoulders, the deliberate breathing that was a man who had been running calculations about Scotland every night for 9 months and had run the last one at maximum speed and arrived to find his 11-year-old standing in a corridor covered in ash with a legendary magical artifact in his pocket. Barry turned back. Okay, he said. His voice was steady. Okay. Tell me everything, in order, and don't leave anything out. I'll tell you after the hospital wing, Harry said. The hospital wing for Ron, Barry said immediately. Then you tell me everything. Deal, Harry said. They walked down the corridor, Harry and Ron and Barry, and somewhere behind them the third floor was just a corridor again, the guardian magic dispersed, the thing it had been guarding gone. The castle breathed around them, old stone and old magic, and the speed force ran through Harry warm and quiet and pleased with itself. Hermione was in the hospital wing when they arrived. She was sitting in a chair next to Ron's assigned bed with a book open and her notes beside her and the expression of someone who has been efficient about waiting. She looked at Harry when he walked in and performed the same rapid assessment Ron had done in the chess room, and she arrived at the same destination, done, whole, carrying something important. The stone, she said. Here, Harry said. What are you going to do with it? Give it to Dumbledore, Harry said. With certain conditions. Hermione looked at him. You're going to put conditions on giving Dumbledore the Philosopher's Stone. The stone needs to be destroyed, Harry said. That's the only way to keep it from being used. Dumbledore will understand that, he's smart enough to know it himself. But I want his word that Nicholas Flamel is told and agrees, and I want to be in the room when the decision is made. Hermione stared at him. He'll say yes, Harry said. How do you know? Because the alternative is that I don't give it to him, Harry said, simply. And he knows I'll do something else with it if he doesn't agree, and the something else is probably better for the stone than whatever Dumbledore's default plan would be. What's the something else? Ron said, from the bed. Give it to Barry to put in the Speed Force, Harry said. There's no vault in any world that's more secure. Barry, who had been standing slightly behind Harry during this exchange with the expression of a man recalibrating his parental situation in real time, said, That's actually a very good plan. I know, Harry said. Dumbledore came to the hospital wing at 6 a.m, which suggested either that someone had told him or that he had methods of knowing things that operated independently of people telling him. He looked smaller than his public presence, the way powerful people often did in quiet rooms at 6 a.m, still significant, still formidable, but the performance stripped away and the person underneath more visible. He looked at Harry for a long moment without speaking. Harry looked back at him. The stone, Dumbledore said. Is safe, Harry said. And available to be destroyed, as it should be, with Flamel's knowledge and agreement. He paused. I'd like to be in the room. Dumbledore's expression went through something complicated. He had expected something here. Harry had known this for months, known it in the way you knew when a situation had been arranged around you rather than happening to you, and he had decided to address it directly rather than circle it. Dumbledore had made certain choices about Harry Potter's first year at Hogwarts. He had put the stone here knowing it would attract Voldemort. He had not told Harry because he had been testing something or protecting something or, possibly, using something, and Harry was not yet sure which. You knew it would come to this, Harry said. Not accusatory. Clear. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Then, I knew something would come to this, he said. The nature of the something was less certain. You arranged for me to face it. I arranged for you to have the opportunity, Dumbledore said, with a precision that was its own kind of answer. There is a difference. Is there? The blue eyes behind the half-moon spectacles were steady and very old and genuinely uncertain in a way that Harry hadn't expected, not the uncertainty of someone caught in something but the uncertainty of someone genuinely asking whether they'd been right. It was the most honest thing he'd seen from an adult in a position of authority who had done something questionable, and it reconfigured his read on Dumbledore without resolving it. I need to understand, Dumbledore said, carefully, what you are. What you've become. It matters for what comes next. For what's coming. You can ask me, Harry said. Will you answer? Depends on the question. Barry moved slightly behind him, not intervening, just present, the specific presence of someone who was there if needed and trusted the person in front of him not to need it. Dumbledore looked at Barry. Something passed across his face that Harry catalogued for later, recognition, assessment, the adjustment of a model that hadn't included this specific element. The Speed Force, Dumbledore said. Yes, Harry said. And the magic. They're the same thing, for me. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. The hospital wing was dawnlight and medicine smells and Ron asleep with his ribs addressed and Hermione not asleep but pretending to be with her book open, and Dumbledore sat in the chair beside Harry's bed and looked at his hands. Tom Riddle, Dumbledore said, which was how he said Voldemort when he was being honest rather than strategic, was the most gifted student I ever taught. I thought Harry Potter would be the instrument of his ending. He looked up. I didn't anticipate an instrument with opinions. I'm not an instrument, Harry said. No, Dumbledore said. You're not. A pause. I'm learning that. Harry looked at him. The old man, the enormous power, the mistakes embedded in the good intentions, all of it legible if you paid attention and stayed honest about what you were looking at. I'll tell you what you need to know, Harry said. I'll help with what's coming, because it needs to be done. But I'm not a piece on a board. He said it without heat, without challenge. Just the fact of it, stated plainly. We do this together or I'm calling Barry and we're working the problem from Central City. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then the corners of his eyes crinkled, something genuine behind the formidable exterior, something that might have been relief. Together, Dumbledore said. Good, Harry said. Barry put a hand on Harry's shoulder. The speed force hummed through both of them, warm and certain, and outside the hospital wing windows the sun came fully up over the grounds of Hogwarts and made the dewy grass blazing green and ordinary and beautiful, and the stone sat in Harry's pocket and waited to be unmade, and Harry Potter sat in the first light of a June morning and felt, without performance or qualification, like exactly what he was, a boy who had won the first round of a very long fight, and was already thinking about the second. Chapter 5. The weight of what you are Central City in July was a particular kind of alive, thick heat off the pavement, the river glinting hard in the afternoon sun, the smell of the city doing what cities did in summer, which was mostly remind you that a lot of people lived very close together and had opinions about air conditioning. Harry sat on the fire escape outside his bedroom window at 6 in the morning when the heat was still bearable and drank his coffee and watched the city wake up and thought about Voldemort. Not with anxiety. More like the way you thought about an equation you hadn't finished solving yet, aware of it, returning to it, turning it over to look at new faces. He'd been home for 3 weeks. The summer had a different texture than last summer, which had been the summer before everything started, and the one before that, and all the summers going back to the first one, when he'd been a 4-year-old on a cot learning that a parking lot at dawn was the best place in the world. This summer had the weight of something that had happened in it. Not heaviness, weight, like ballast, like the thing that kept you upright. Barry knocked on the window frame from inside. Coffee? Already have some, Harry said, holding up his mug. Barry climbed out onto the fire escape with his own mug and sat on the step above Harry and looked at the city for a moment. He did this sometimes, showed up without an agenda, without anything to fix, just present. Harry had grown up understanding this as love in its most functional form, the willingness to occupy space near someone without requiring anything from the moment. You've been up since 4, Barry said. You tracked me? The speed force, Barry said. It tells me when you're moving. Not your location exactly, more like, you know the way you can hear a specific instrument in an orchestra even when the whole thing is playing? Harry considered this. I didn't know that. It's not surveillance, Barry said. It's more like, awareness. Like knowing someone's in the next room. That's fine, Harry said. I'd tell you if it wasn't. Barry looked at him for a moment, and Harry felt the assessment, not the forensic check for damage assessment of post-incident Barry, which had been running for the first 2 weeks home, but the ordinary parental assessment of someone watching someone they loved to see how they actually were. The Voldemort thing he said, Barry said. About your parents. Harry wrapped both hands around his mug. You got the full debrief, he said. I did. I want to know how you actually feel about it. Below them the city made its morning sounds, a car, someone's window AC unit cycling on, a dog with opinions. Harry thought about the red eyes and the borrowed voice and the specific shape of what Voldemort had offered. He'd been thinking about it since June 14th and he had a fairly complete picture of what it had done to him, which was both less and more than simple. He knew them, Harry said. He was there. The last people alive who saw my parents alive are him and me, and I was 1 year old, and he's, whatever he is now. He looked at the city. That's strange. It's specifically strange. Not painful exactly, more like, there's a room that should have people in it and it doesn't, and I know the exact shape of the absence because of Voldemort, which means the thing that made the absence is also the thing that defined it. Barry was quiet. I'm fine, Harry said. That's not a deflection. I mean that I've thought about it enough to know what it is and what it isn't. It isn't something I can be leveraged with, which I think was his actual goal. But it's not nothing. It shouldn't be nothing, Barry said. No, Harry agreed. Barry. He turned and looked up at him. Did you know them? Before, any contact through the Justice League or, no, Barry said. The magical world and the metahuman world don't overlap much. Dumbledore keeps it that way deliberately. He paused. I've looked, since I found you. There's a vault at Gringotts, your parents' estate. There will be things there. We can go, whenever you're ready. Not yet, Harry said. When I'm ready to want them rather than needing them. Barry nodded. That was the right answer and he knew it, and he didn't push it. They drank their coffee and the city finished waking up, and Harry thought about the Speed Force and what Voldemort had said, that Barry ran in the gaps between moments, not through them, and that Harry with both powers fully combined would become something specific and definite that Voldemort had spent 10 years theorizing about. He hadn't mentioned this part to Barry yet, because he was still deciding what he thought about it, and he didn't offer information he hadn't finished processing. He mentioned it now. Barry went still in the way he went still when something was important. He said you run in the gaps between moments, Harry said. Between, not through. He said the Speed Force is time, at the margins. He looked at his coffee. Is that true? It's partially true, Barry said. It's more complicated than that. I know. But is the partial true? Yeah, Barry said quietly. Yeah, it's in the ballpark. He said with both, the Speed Force and the magic combined and fully developed, I'd become something he'd been modeling for 10 years. Something specific. Barry looked at him. What kind of specific? He didn't say. Harry turned the mug in his hands. He was offering it as a reason to talk to him. Information leverage. He paused. I've been thinking about it. What have you come up with? The Speed Force interfaces with time, Harry said. Magic interfaces with reality, with physical law, with the fabric of things. If you run between moments and the magic bends what moments are made of, he stopped. The equation didn't finish neatly, which meant he was still missing a variable. I don't know yet. Cisco might. Cisco definitely has theories, Barry said. He's been unusually quiet about this particular line of thinking, which means he has theories he's not sure I want to hear. I want to hear them, Harry said. I know you do, Barry said. I'll set it up. They were interrupted by Harry's phone, which produced the specific notification sound he'd assigned to Hermione, a clean chime, because everything about Hermione's communication was clean and timed and purposeful. He checked it. I've been researching the soul fragment hypothesis, the message read. Can you talk? Fire escape, Harry typed back. Call me. She called. Her voice had the focused quality it got when she was in the middle of something she'd been building for a while. The scar, she said, without preamble. The residual signature. I've been cross-referencing the curse deflection theory with what you told me about the Quirrell confrontation, and there's a structural problem. Tell me, Harry said. The killing curse left something in you when it deflected. You know this, we've talked about it. But what I didn't have before was the way the Speed Force was involved in the deflection. A pause, papers shuffling. The Speed Force in a 1-year-old would have been almost entirely unconscious. Instinctive. But if it responded to the curse the way it responded to the Quirrell curse, reading the kinetic component, interfering with the trajectory, it would have deflected it, Harry said. But the magical component would have needed somewhere to go, Hermione said. Curses aren't just kinetic. They're intent and power, and they need a vessel if they can't complete their original purpose. She stopped. Harry. The soul fragment. I don't think it's in your scar. Harry went very still. I think the scar is the entry point. I think the Speed Force caught the kinetic component of the curse and the deflection was perfect for that part, but the magical soul component hit the Speed Force field in you and the field, absorbed it. Incorporated it. The way it incorporated the magic itself. You think Voldemort's soul fragment is in my Speed Force, Harry said. In the connection between the Speed Force and your magic, Hermione said. Not in your cells. In the interface layer. She was speaking quickly now, the way she did when a theory was pulling her forward faster than she could articulate it. Which means it's not in you exactly, it's in the space between what you are. And the speed force has been running alongside it for 10 years and it hasn't been damaged by it, Harry said. The speed force I feel is clean. It's always been clean. Because the speed force is isolating it, Hermione said. Containing it. Using it as a kind of fuel source almost, converting the dark magic component into the combined power, Harry said. Silence on the line. The white gold lightning, Harry said. The combined speed force magic. The August explosion. It's, Voldemort's soul fragment is being broken down and used as fuel. That's my theory, Hermione said. I could be wrong. I'm almost certainly missing things. But the structural evidence, you're not wrong, Harry said. He could feel it now that he was looking for it, not Voldemort, not the presence of something alien, but the speed force running through a layer of something that it had been processing for years, the way a river processed silt and came out cleaner on the other side. How long until it's gone completely? I don't know, Hermione said. Years, maybe. The magical density is, she hesitated, significant. Okay, Harry said. Okay, she echoed. You're not panicking. Why would I panic? Harry said. It's not hurting me. The speed force is handling it. I've had it my whole life and I didn't even know, which means it wasn't doing anything bad. Some people would panic, she said. I'm not some people, Harry said. He felt her smile through the phone, somehow. No, she said. You're really not. A pause. How's Central City? Hot, Harry said. Good. Come visit. I'll ask Mum and Dad, she said, and the warmth in how she said it, the easy normalcy of having parents you could ask things, was something she didn't draw attention to and Harry didn't either, because it was just the truth of how things were. Ask soon, Harry said. I want to show you the lab. Barry, who had been listening to Harry's half of this conversation with the focused attention of someone fitting new pieces into a picture he'd been building for years, said, when Harry hung up, the soul fragment. You heard. Speed force hearing, Barry said. Hazard of the condition. Harry turned to look at him. You're not alarmed. I'm processing, Barry said. There's a difference. He looked at the city. The speed force has been handling it. Since I was 1 year old, Harry said. The speed force, Barry said, slowly, has a very strong opinion about what belongs in it and what doesn't. If it's been breaking down a soul fragment for 10 years without me detecting it and without any negative effect on you, then it decided early on that this was something it was equipped to manage. Cisco said the harmonics were stable, Harry said. At 9. They were stable and reinforcing. Yeah, Barry said. He was quiet for a moment. Voldemort is in you in a way that's making you stronger. That'll bother him, Harry said. It should, Barry said, and the flatness in it was the version of Barry that showed up very occasionally, not the warm, funny, impulsive Barry of most interactions, but the underneath Barry, the one who had lost his mother to a speedster's choices and spent years running toward every wrong thing he could find because fixing things was the only adequate response to a universe that hadn't been fixed in time. It absolutely should bother him. Harry looked at his father for a moment. Then he looked back at the city. Cisco today. Harry said. I'll call him now, Barry said. Cisco's reaction to the soul fragment theory was 3 stages. First, the focused scientific attention of someone evaluating evidence. Second, the barely suppressed excitement of someone who has just been handed the most interesting research problem of their career. And third, a silence that was long enough to be genuinely unnerving before he said, Okay. Okay, I need to show you something. They were in the workshop by 10, the air conditioning running full blast, Cisco pulling up files he'd been keeping since the August explosion, since longer than that, files that went back to the original Surrey readings, the first measurements, all of it layered and cross-referenced with the particular comprehensive architecture of a man who had decided early on that this situation warranted thorough documentation. "I've been calling it the unified field," Cisco said. He had a holographic display up, the three-dimensional model of energy signatures that he'd been refining for years. It showed Harry as a nexus, two distinct energy signatures not running in parallel but genuinely integrated, woven together at the level of the model's resolution. Speed force on the carrier wave. Magic on the signal. Except it's not that clean, they've been interacting long enough that the carrier and the signal are the same thing now. The unified field, Harry said. It's a working title, Cisco said. The point is, and this is what I've been working up to telling Barry for like 6 months but couldn't figure out how to say without it sounding insane, he looked at Barry, it sounds insane. I've heard insane, Barry said. Cisco. The speed force interfaces with time, Cisco said. Right. We know this. Barry runs between moments. The speed force is the medium by which that happens. It's not just speed, it's the underlying property of which speed is a surface expression, and that property is, he made a gesture at the holographic model, temporal kinetic potential. The possibility of motion through time-space. He turned to the model. Magic, as a system, is fundamentally about altering physical reality through intent and energy. It bends the rules. It changes what things are. He pointed at the two signatures in the model. What happens when the medium for moving through time-space starts being bent by a system that changes what things are? You get something that can change time-space, Harry said. Not change it, Cisco said. More like, negotiate with it. The speed force gives you access to the seams, right? The gaps between moments. Magic gives you the ability to alter what's at the seams. Together, he pulled up a new model, theoretical, extrapolated, you could potentially alter events that haven't finalized yet. Not rewrite history, the speed force doesn't work like that and the safeguards are baked in. But at the margin, at the thin edge where a moment hasn't fully committed to being what it becomes, I could intervene, Harry said. You could choose, Cisco said. More precisely than Barry can. Because Barry moves through time accidentally, with enormous effort and collateral. You would move through it deliberately, with the magic acting as guidance system. Intent-directed temporal intervention. He looked at them both. That's what Voldemort spent 10 years theorizing about. The workshop was quiet except for the air conditioning. He wanted to use me to undo his death, Harry said. Or prevent it preemptively, Cisco said. In any of a dozen timelines. A Voldemort who'd figured out the full scope of what you'd become, who had a Harry Potter on his side, could potentially be unkillable in a way that went beyond Horcruxes. Harry looked at the holographic model. The two signatures woven together, the nexus point that was him. He thought about the red eyes and the borrowed voice and the specific intelligence of a man who had been alone with his own theories for 10 years and had arrived at something accurate. That's why he kept offering to talk, Harry said. At the end. He wanted me to understand what I was. He thought if I understood I'd want the same things he wanted. You don't, Barry said. No, Harry said. But I need to understand what I am regardless. Not for him. For me. He looked at Cisco. How far along is the development? Based on your readings, Cisco said carefully, you're early. The full potential of the unified field requires the magic to be much more developed than it is at 11. You've got Hogwarts, you've got years of training ahead. It's not accessible now. When will it be? I genuinely don't know, Cisco said. I don't have a model for this because there's no precedent. He paused. But I think, based on the rate of integration since the August explosion, maybe mid to late Hogwarts. 15, 16. Okay, Harry said. Okay. Barry said. It's good information, Harry said. I'd rather know. He looked at the model for another moment, then turned away from it. The soul fragment. Does it affect the integration? Cisco's expression did something quick and complicated. I was hoping you'd ask me something easier. He pulled up the relevant section of the readings. The soul fragment is dark magic, specifically, it's fractured soul energy, which is a form of life force. The speed force is life force at its most fundamental. So the fragment is being processed by something operating at the same energy level, like, he thought about it, like the body processing a foreign body. Slow, constant, and the byproduct of that processing is additional power, Harry said. We covered this. What I didn't cover, Cisco said, is that as the fragment breaks down, it releases information. Both Harry and Barry went still. Soul magic carries memory, Cisco said. Not accessible memory, it's not like reading a book. But as the speed force converts the fragment, the information encoded in it gets absorbed into the unified field. Which means, I'm slowly getting Voldemort's memories, Harry said. Impressions, Cisco said. Residue. Not clear access. More like, imagine if every book in a library was burned and you could smell what the smoke had been. You'd know things without knowing specifically what you knew or where it came from. Harry thought about this. He thought about the moments since June when he'd known things he didn't have a source for, the specific shape of a dark spell before Quirrell cast it, the structure of the desire magic in the mirror, the way the troll moved before it moved. He'd put it down to speed force awareness, to the extended electromagnetic reading he did continuously without thinking about it. Oh, he said. Yeah, Cisco said. So I have Voldemort's tactical instincts, Harry said. Bits of them. Getting clearer as the fragment breaks down. Weaponized, Barry said, with the particular dry quality he got when something was both disturbing and genuinely impressive. You're using the piece of him that's been in you as a tactical database. The speed force is, Harry said. I don't get to choose which impressions I receive. But you receive them, Cisco said. And you process them with your own judgment. So they're filtered. You get the tactical information without the underlying motivation. Harry looked at the holographic model. He thought about Voldemort's intelligence, which had been real and comprehensive and directed entirely at the wrong goals. He thought about 10 years of the speed force running alongside it, processing it, using the dark energy as fuel and the informational content as, what? A library. An archive. A comprehensive guide to dark magic written by its most accomplished practitioner, absorbed slowly and without Harry's knowledge into the most powerful magical kinetic field in the world. Hermione would have a field day with this, Harry said. Hermione is going to lose her entire mind, Cisco agreed. Don't tell her yet, Harry said. I want to tell her myself. Deal, Cisco said. Harry looked at Barry. You're quiet. Thinking, Barry said. About whether I should have found you sooner. You couldn't have found me sooner, Harry said. The reading wasn't strong enough before then. I know, Barry said. It's not rational. You found me, Harry said. That's the only part that matters. Barry looked at him with the eyes of a man who had been given something he hadn't known he needed and had been careful with it ever since. Yeah, he said. I did. The knock came 3 days later. Not at the apartment, at STR Labs, which had a security system that was comprehensive enough to detect and flag things that weren't metahuman but were definitively unusual. Cisco's alert came through at 7 in the evening, when Harry was in the workshop running modified speed exercises with Cisco tracking the unified field's behavior under sustained acceleration. The alert said, someone's at the perimeter. Definitely magical. Not hostile, the signature reads as, actually it reads as official. Like, formal official. Barry came through the workshop door still in his suit, having been halfway through a city sweep when the alert hit. He looked at Cisco's screen and then at Harry. Expecting someone? No, Harry said. He was already reading the perimeter sensor data over Cisco's shoulder. The magical signature was formal the way Hogwarts letters were formal, layered, institutional, deliberate. He knew this signature category, though he hadn't felt it before. Ministry of Magic. Someone from the British Ministry of Magic was standing at the perimeter of STR Labs in Central City. Interesting, Harry said. The visitor was a witch in her mid-40s named Arabella Clearwater, Ministry Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Liaison Division. She was compact and precise and clearly not accustomed to being the least certain person in any given room, which she was tonight by significant margin. She sat in the conference room with her hands folded on the table and looked at Barry in his civilian clothes and Cisco with a smoothie and Harry in running gear with the residual glow of Speed Force still visible at his knuckles, and she took a single measured breath. "We're aware of what happened at Hogwarts," she said. "That's reassuring," Harry said pleasantly. "The official position is that a defense professor suffered a breakdown," she said. "The stone's destruction has been managed quietly. The Ministry has concerns." She stopped. "This is unusual for me," she said, with a candor that Harry hadn't expected. "I was briefed on your situation, Mr. Potter, and the briefing was inadequate." "It usually is," Harry said. "The concern," she said, recollecting herself, "is that that the entity's failed possession attempt has destabilized certain elements that the Ministry had thought stable. Specifically, she opened a folder. 3 former Death Eaters who have been under watch have in the past 4 weeks shown significant increases in dark magical activity. Coordinated increases." Barry leaned forward. "Coordinated how?" "The timing," Clearwater said. "All 3 in the same 48-hour window. As if they'd been signaled." She looked at Harry. "We believe the signal was the event at Hogwarts. We believe the entity's expulsion from its host sent some form of communication to remaining loyal followers." "A pain response," Harry said. "He was hurt. They felt it." Clearwater looked at him. "You're 11, she said. "I know," Harry said. "What do you want from me?" She closed the folder. "I want to know what happened in that room," she said. "Not the official version Dumbledore filed. The actual event. Because the readings our curse detection teams picked up in the aftermath were, unprecedented is too small a word." "Unified field," Cisco said, unable to help himself. Barry looked at him. "Sorry. The name fits. It's very accurate." Clearwater looked at Cisco. "Unified field," she repeated. "The Speed Force and the magic are the same thing in me," Harry said. "When I contacted Quirrell, when the Speed Force interfaced with the dark magic, it had an effect on the soul fragment that was using Quirrell as a host." "What effect?" Clearwater said. "Dispersal," Harry said. "The Speed Force processed it." He paused, deciding how much to give her. She seemed honest, her concern was genuine, her uncertainty was genuine, the candor about the inadequate briefing had been offered voluntarily, which meant she was negotiating in good faith. "He's not gone," Harry said. "The fragment at Hogwarts is dispersed but he has other anchors. Horcruxes." Clearwater's expression changed. "You know what those are," Harry said. "I know the word," she said carefully. "From theoretical dark arts literature." "He made more than one," Harry said. "I don't know the exact number yet." "Which means he can reconstitute." "Which means what happened at Hogwarts was a battle, not the end of the war." The room was quiet for a moment. "Dumbledore knows this," Barry said. It wasn't a question. "Dumbledore knows some of it," Harry said. "We'll have a conversation at the start of term." Clearwater looked at him with the expression of someone updating a very important file. "What do you need from the Ministry?" she said. Harry looked at her. She'd asked the right question, not what she could offer, not what trade she was proposing, but what he actually needed, which put the agency in the right place. "Information access," Harry said. "Specifically anything the Ministry has on Horcrux investigations, even theoretical." And a direct contact I can reach without going through official channels if I find something that needs to be acted on faster than bureaucracy allows. She started, and stopped. That's not a small ask. No, Harry said. But it's smaller than the alternative. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she opened the folder again and wrote something on the inside front cover and tore it out and slid it across the table to him. It was a flu address and a name, Marcus Vance, Unspeakable's Division. He'll know I sent you, she said. He'll know the context. She paused. He's one of 3 people in the ministry who knows what Horcruxes actually are. He's been waiting for someone to use this information for 20 years. Harry pocketed the paper. Thank you. She stood. She looked around the room once more, at Barry, at Cisco with his smoothie, at Harry in his running gear with the faint Speed Force light at his hands, at the holographic model Cisco had forgotten to close that showed the unified field in its 3-dimensional splendor. The briefing, she said, was extremely inadequate. She nodded once, crisply, and left. After the door closed, Cisco said, I love her energy. She's good, Harry agreed. File the meeting. I want a record. Barry was quiet. Harry looked at him. What? Harry said. Nothing, Barry said. You did that very well. She was honest, Harry said. It's easy to work with honest people. You knew she was honest, Barry said. Before she said anything useful. Her signature was clean, Harry said simply. Dark magic has a specific frequency and her field was completely clear. You can fake a lot of things but you can't fake your electromagnetic frequency. Barry looked at him for a moment. When did you start reading people's electromagnetic frequencies? About 14 months ago, Harry said. Maybe 15. It came in gradually. He looked at his hands, where the Speed Force light had fully faded to skin. I didn't mention it because I wasn't sure what to do with it and I didn't want to alarm anyone. Does it work on everyone? Cisco said, immediately scientifically fascinated, all professional composure abandoned. Everyone who has any magical signature, Harry said. Muggles are quieter but they have a baseline. Dark magic users have a specific disruption pattern. He looked at Cisco. You're clean, he said. You read like clean electricity. Like a circuit doing exactly what it was designed to do. Cisco visibly softened in a way he immediately tried to cover with the smoothie. Yeah. That's the nicest thing. Don't tell anyone I got emotional about that. Barry reads like the Speed Force with a person in it, Harry said. Which I guess is accurate. Barry looked at him. Harry looked back, and something passed between them that didn't require words, the specific communication of 2 people who were made of the same fundamental thing and had been figuring out how to live with that fact for 11 years, which was still ongoing but was going very well. Okay, Barry said. What do you want to do about the 3 Death Eaters? Nothing yet, Harry said. Let them move. Learn their patterns. When I'm back at Hogwarts I'll have more access to the information network. He paused. Hermione's coming next week. I know, Barry said. I bought ingredients. For what? That pasta thing she likes, Barry said, with the dignity of a man who had been learning to cook incrementally for 11 years and had gotten reasonably good at specific dishes. Harry looked at him. You learned to make her pasta. She mentioned it once in March, Barry said. She said it was her favorite. Harry looked at his father, at the man who had found him in a cupboard and brought him home and ran alongside him in parking lots and bought pasta ingredients for his 11-year-old's best friend, and felt the fullness in his chest that had no clean name, that he'd stopped trying to name around the time he was 8. Harry started. Don't, Barry said, with the preemptive defensiveness of someone who knew exactly what was coming. I was going to say that's good, Harry said. You were going to make it a whole thing. I wasn't, Harry said. Barry. That's good. Genuinely. Barry's expression settled. The pasta's actually quite hard, he said. The timing is, you can do it, Harry said. You can run faster than lightning. You can manage pasta timing. The pasta has different variables than lightning, Barry said, with feeling. Harry grinned. Barry saw it and rolled his eyes, which was a fond eye roll, the specific kind he'd been deploying since Harry was 6 and which Harry had long since classified as its own category of affection. Hermione arrived on a Tuesday with 2 suitcases and a tote bag full of books and the expression of someone who had been looking forward to this for a significant period of time and was managing their enthusiasm professionally. She stood in the doorway of the apartment and looked around with the systematic assessment she brought to new spaces, cataloging the bookshelves and the kitchen and the framed photograph of Barry and Joe on the wall and the smaller framed photograph beside it, Harry at 9 with the STR. Lab's workshop in the background, covered in whatever the August explosion had done to the air around him, white gold light on every surface, grinning like someone had just given him the best gift. You look happy, she said, looking at the photo. I was, Harry said. That was the day the Speed Force and the magic unified. She looked at it for another moment. Then she turned and looked at Harry with the eyes that always made him feel precisely and accurately seen. You found something else out, she said. Since we last talked. Something big. What makes you say that, he said, genuinely curious. You have a specific expression, she said. When you've been sitting with information. Like you're waiting to find the right way to give it to someone. He looked at her. She looked back, straight and certain. Come in, he said. I'll make tea and tell you. She came in, and the apartment received her with the particular ease of a space that was used to people mattering in it, and Barry appeared from the kitchen to say hello and immediately started telling her about the pasta timing problem, and Hermione engaged with the pasta timing problem with genuine interest because that was how Hermione engaged with problems. And Harry made tea and listened to Barry and Hermione discuss pasta timing and felt the Speed Force warm and content in his chest. The unified field running in its deep register. He told her about the soul fragment over tea. She went still, then went into the fast processing mode, then asked 11 questions in approximately 4 minutes, which he answered in order. By the end she had the notebook out that she'd dedicated to the Speed Force research, thick with 3 years of careful observation, and was adding to it with the focused energy of someone recontextualizing a significant portion of their existing model. The impressions, she said. Voldemort's tactical memories. Do you have any way to consciously access them? Not yet, Harry said. I receive them when they're relevant. The Speed Force does the selection. Can you feel when one is being processed? When the fragment breaks down further? Harry thought about it. Sometimes, he said. It feels like knowing something without knowing why. She wrote. Then she looked up. You're not frightened of it, she said. No, he said. You should possibly be frightened of it, she said. Why? He said, genuinely. She opened her mouth and then closed it, working through it honestly. Because having pieces of a Dark Lord in your power set is, she stopped. You're right, she said. There's nothing in that sentence that actually argues for being frightened. The Speed Force is processing it safely and the byproduct is useful information. The emotional response of frightened is not indicated by the actual data. The emotional response of interested is, Harry said. She looked at him for a moment. Genuinely, she said. You are going to be my most interesting intellectual challenge for the rest of my life and I've decided to be entirely positive about this. I am positive about it, Harry said. Yes, well, she said, you would be. Ron sent a letter that arrived the same day Hermione did, carried by the Weasley family owl, which was named Errol and appeared to be operating on spite and persistence in roughly equal measure, since he fell off the windowsill on arrival. The letter was Ron in pure text form, enthusiastic, direct, slightly chaotic in its transitions, and carrying at its core the complete and uncomplicated warmth of someone who had decided Harry was his friend without reservation and operated on that decision consistently. The letter said, among other things, chess is going fine, ribs healed, Mom made me a cake because she says heroes deserve cake, and I told her I moved a chess piece and she said that was heroic enough for Weasley standards, which I'm choosing to take as a compliment. Fred and George say well done to your friend with the lightning, which I think means they saw something they weren't supposed to. How's America? Does it have good chess? Harry wrote back that evening, a long letter, longer than he usually wrote, with real content rather than the summary he might have produced before a year of being Ron Weasley's friend had calibrated him to the kind of honesty Ron responded to. He told him about Cisco's theories. He told him about the ministry visit. He didn't tell him the soul fragment detail yet, not because he didn't trust Ron, but because it was the kind of information that needed a face-to-face conversation, the kind where you could watch someone process it and help them through the complicated parts. He finished the letter and sealed it and looked out the fire escape window at the city, which was full dark now, the lights doing what city lights did at night, which was make the darkness friendly rather than absent. The speed force hummed through him. The unified field ran at its deep register. Somewhere in the integrated space between the speed force and his magic, Voldemort's soul fragment was being steadily, patiently, comprehensively unmade. Harry thought, somewhere in Britain 3 Death Eaters were responding to a signal, and whatever they were building toward was pointed at him, and the war was not over, and there were Horcruxes he didn't know the number of, and Voldemort was out there in whatever form he currently took, and Dumbledore had plans within plans that Harry would have to navigate, and second year was 2 months away. He thought all of this, and he felt the unified field steady and warm and running clean, and he thought, good. He was ready. He would run until he caught everything that needed catching, and the speed force would be there when he did, and the magic would bend what needed bending, and Hermione would have the research done and Ron would have the chess moves calculated and Barry would be 17 seconds away at any given moment. The city hummed. Harry Potter sat on his fire escape in the July dark and was, without question or complication, exactly ready for what was coming. 3 floors down, in the kitchen, Barry Allen was battling pasta timing with the focused determination of a man who had run through walls and would not be defeated by carbohydrates. The speed force, if it had an opinion, kept it to itself. But it did run warm. Chapter 6, Faster Than Fear. The rogue speedster had a name, and the name was Edmund Carrow. Harry found it 3 weeks into August, at the end of a research thread that had started with Clearwater's ministry visit and run through Cisco's files and wound up in a particular drawer of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement's case archive that Marcus Vance, the unspeakable, had flagged for him via sealed letter. The file was thin, the ministry had not understood what they were looking at when they'd looked at it, which was the consistent problem with institutions that organized knowledge in categories and then refused to believe something could belong to 2 categories at once. Edmund Carrow. Former Death Eater, younger brother of the Carrow siblings who'd served Voldemort directly. Not a frontline operative, a researcher. The ministry file described him as a magical theorist specializing in energy transference, which was a phrase that had meant nothing to the ministry investigator who'd written it and meant something very specific to Harry, who had been sitting with Cisco's unified field theory for 2 months and recognized the vocabulary. He'd been present at Godric's Hollow. Not inside the house, no one outside Voldemort's innermost circle had been inside the house that night, but on the perimeter. Watching. And when Voldemort's curse had deflected and the magical explosion that no one had fully explained had ripped outward from the house, Carrow had been in its path. The ministry file noted that he'd been found unconscious 2 miles from the hollow the following morning. It noted that his magical signature had been altered, flagged as possible curse damage, closed as inconclusive. It noted that he'd spent 6 months in St. Mungo's. And then he'd walked out, claimed to have turned away from Voldemort, and the ministry had monitored him for 2 years and found nothing and closed the file. The file had been closed in 1983. Harry read it twice. Then he sent a message to Cisco that said, "I need the Speed Force sensor array you've been building for the European network. Specifically, I need it to flag signatures that are Speed Force adjacent but corrupted. Like the Speed Force ate something wrong." Cisco's response took 4 minutes, which was unusually long for Cisco, and said, "Where did you hear that phrase?" Harry looked at the message. Then he typed, "That's what you said the first night. About the Surrey reading. Speed Force ate something it shouldn't have." The response came back in 10 seconds, "Harry. I already have a flag. I've had it for 3 weeks. I was trying to figure out how to tell Barry." Harry set his phone down on the kitchen table and looked at it for a moment. Then he picked it up and called Cisco directly. Cisco answered with, "Okay, so, tell me," Harry said. 3 weeks ago the array picked up a signature in Edinburgh," Cisco said, and his voice had the quality it got when something was genuinely worrying him, which was different from the quality it got when something was excitingly dangerous, and Harry paid attention to the difference. "Speed Force adjacent, like I said. But, distorted. Like the Speed Force in someone who got it wrong. Got it, sideways. Like they absorbed a piece of it without the framework to run it through safely." "The explosion at Godric's Hollow," Harry said. 1981, Edmund Caro was on the perimeter when it went off. Silence. "He absorbed a fragment," Harry said. "When the Speed Force deflected the killing curse and the magical explosion went out from the house, he was close enough that a fragment of the Speed Force got into him. Like the soul fragment in me but the opposite. I have dark magic in my Speed Force. He has Speed Force in his dark magic." "Oh, that is not good," Cisco said quietly. "Harry, the Speed Force without the framework, without the physical and psychological preparation, it's like giving someone mains electricity without grounding them first," Harry said. "Yes," Cisco said. "Exactly like that. What it does to someone over 20 years, the corruption would be significant. The speed would be there, in flashes, but uncontrollable. And the magic would be, amplified, but dark. Bent toward destruction because that's what an ungrounded Speed Force does to intent, it magnifies it. He was a Death Eater when he absorbed it," Harry said. "So 20 years of dark magic amplified and accelerated," Cisco said. "And the speed, how fast would he be, do you think?" Harry thought about it. "Less than me," he said. "The framework matters for speed. But fast enough to be dangerous to people who don't know what they're looking at." "Barry's not home," Cisco said. "He's been in Coast City since Tuesday. A meta thing, should wrap up today or tomorrow." A pause. "Harry. I'm not waiting for Barry," Harry said. "I know," Cisco said. "That's why I said his name like that." "Cisco," Harry said. "I'm not asking permission. I'm asking for backup." A breath. "Edinburgh," Cisco said. "The signature has been stationary for 3 days at the same address. A warehouse district near the Water of Leith. I'll send you the coordinates." "Send them," Harry said. "And call Barry. Not to stop me, to update him. This distinction," Cisco said, "is very important to you." "Barry doesn't stop me from doing necessary things," Harry said. "He helps me do them better. There's a difference. You've been his kid for 7 years and somehow you've become the emotionally mature one," Cisco said, with genuine puzzlement. "Coordinates incoming. I'm opening a comm channel, you take the earpiece, the one in your 3rd drawer." "I know where it is," Harry said. "Harry." Cisco's voice shifted. "This person has had 20 years to develop what he has. He's been building toward something. The signal strength in Edinburgh has been increasing for 3 weeks, which means whatever he's building, he's close to finished." "I know," Harry said. "Don't be stupid about it," Cisco said. "Smart and fast and that's it. Don't let him talk too long, don't let him get close, and if it goes wrong, it won't," Harry said. "But if it, Cisco," Harry said. "It won't." He was already moving toward his room to change. Hermione found him in the hallway, which was the specific kind of coincidence that wasn't, because Hermione had been staying in the guest room for 2 weeks and had the same sensitivity to shifts in the apartment's atmosphere that she had to shifts in the energy of any space she inhabited for long enough. She looked at him, the running gear, the earpiece in his hand, the expression he was wearing which was the clear and focused one rather than the everyday one, and she did the rapid assessment she'd gotten very good at. "What is it?" she said. He told her. Efficiently, all the relevant information, because Hermione with complete information was more useful than Hermione being protected from something, and she told him that clearly and specifically on 2 occasions and he'd listened both times. She processed it in real time, visible in the small movements of her face, the concern, the analytical engagement, the decision about what her role was. "I'm coming," she said. "No," Harry said. She looked at him. "Not because I don't trust you," he said immediately. "Because a corrupted Speed Force user is going to be throwing a combination of dark magic and kinetic force, and if you're in that space you're a liability, not an asset. Your magic is conventional. Mine is the only thing in the room that can interface with what he has." She held his gaze for a moment. He held it back, steady and honest and not moving. "You're right," she said. It cost her something to say it, the particular cost of an extremely capable person acknowledging that capability had a specific context. "But I'm on the comm with Cisco." "Yes," Harry said. "Absolutely yes. And if something goes wrong, I call for Barry," Harry said. "The comm stays open. You hear everything." She looked at him for one more second. Then she stepped out of the doorway and said, "Be faster than him." "That's the plan," Harry said. Edinburgh came up in his awareness the way destinations always did when he was running, not as a place he traveled to but as a place that arrived around him, the Speed Force collapsing the distance to a personal irrelevance. He went east-northeast at the speed he'd internally classified as serious, the speed that left afterimages and made the air smell like ozone and rain, and Britain materialized beneath him in the long gold light of a late August afternoon. The warehouse district near the water of Leith was industrial and quiet in the specific way of places that had been repurposed recently, the bones of old industry with the skin of something newer and less definable. He came down 2 blocks from the coordinate Cisco had sent and stood in an alley and let the Speed Force settle from running speed to awareness speed, which was different, which was the reading the room speed, the electromagnetic survey of everything within range. He found Caro's signature immediately. It was exactly what Cisco had described, Speed Force adjacent, but wrong. Like a chord played in almost the right key, the dissonance subtle enough to miss if you weren't listening for it, obvious once you knew what to hear. It pulsed from the warehouse at the end of the block with the irregular rhythm of something that had never been trained to run smoothly, like an engine with a damaged timing belt, all the power there and none of the control. There were 3 other signatures in the building. 2 were conventional dark magic, the specific disruption pattern Harry had learned to read from his electromagnetic survey work. Caro Associates, probably the Death Eaters Clearwater had flagged. The 3rd was different. Harry stood very still in the alley and read the 3rd signature carefully. It was young. A child, probably, the magical frequency of someone who hadn't finished developing yet, whose signature was still unformed at the edges. And it was frightened, which had a specific electromagnetic quality, the field tight and contracted rather than open, the way people's fields went when they were under sustained threat. He'd known there would be a complication. There was always a complication. He opened the comm, "Cisco." "Reading you," Cisco said. "You're at the location. 3 signatures plus Caro. 2 Death Eaters. And someone young. Maybe 12, 13. Frightened." He paused. "Do you have any intelligence on what Caro was building toward? What the end goal was?" Keyboard sounds. "The ministry file you sent me, the one on Caro theoretical work. I've been running it against the Speed Force absorption data." More keys. He was working on a transference ritual. Something that would allow him to stabilize his Speed Force fragment by passing it through a more compatible host. Someone whose magical field was, a pause, powerful enough to accept it without burning out. Someone young, Harry said. With a strong raw magical signature. The ritual would kill the host, Cisco said. The Speed Force absorbed into an untrained field, in a child, I know, Harry said. He thought about the warehouse and the 3 signatures and what Caro had spent 20 years building toward. He thought about himself at 1 year old with the speed force in his cells and what would have happened to him without Barry and the parking lots and the training and the framework. What does the ritual need? Components. Timing. More keys. The magical component would need to be initiated first. It's a preparation sequence, probably an hour's worth of preparation, then the actual transference is quick. If he's been stationary for 3 days, he's in the preparation phase, Harry said. How far along? I can't know exactly. But 3 days of increasing signal strength, you might be at the end of the preparation window. Which means the transference is tonight, Harry said. Most likely, Cisco said. Harry. Still here, Harry said. The 2 Death Eaters in there are going to be a problem, Cisco said. They're watching the door and the perimeter. I'm getting ambient dark magic readings consistent with active ward work. What kind of wards? Detection, mostly. And 1 binding ward on the door, it's set to trigger if something with a speed force signature crosses it. Harry looked at the warehouse. He thought about the child inside and Caro 20 years of building toward this moment and the binding ward on the door and the 2 Death Eaters and the timing window closing. The ward is set for speed force signatures, he said. Yes, Cisco said. It's designed to keep me out, Harry said. Or at minimum alert him that I'm coming. That's what it looks like. Harry thought about this. He thought about Voldemort's tactical instincts, the impressions that the speed force had been feeding him in small doses for months, the accumulated knowledge of a man who had spent his entire adult life thinking about how to set traps, how to create conditions, how to force an opponent onto terrain of your choosing. He thought about what Caro would have known, having been on the periphery of that world for 20 years. He thought about the ward. It's set for speed force, he said. Not for magic. A pause. You're going to go in without the speed force active, Cisco said slowly. I'm going to go in as a wizard, Harry said. Standard magical signature. No speed force on the surface, it'll read as a wizard with an unusual field, nothing more. The ward is looking for a specific thing. If I'm not running that thing, the ward won't see me. Can you do that? Suppress the speed force signature enough, I've been practicing it, Harry said. For 3 months. Hermione's been helping me measure the suppression depth. He paused. I didn't tell Barry because he'd have wanted to understand the why before the what and I wanted to develop the what first. That is extremely you, Cisco said. Okay. Assuming you can suppress, you go in as a wizard. What about inside? Inside I'm everything I am, Harry said simply. He pulled the speed force back. It was the hardest thing he'd learned to do, not because it was technically difficult but because the speed force didn't want to be pulled back, the way breathing didn't want to be deliberately slowed. It was his natural state, the background hum of his existence, and withdrawing it was like holding your breath, possible and uncomfortable and something you couldn't sustain indefinitely. He pulled it back, layer by layer, the way you'd reduce a sound to just barely audible, not gone, not disconnected, just below the threshold of external detection. The unified field didn't disappear, it went internal, running in the deep register, invisible from outside. His hands stopped glowing. He looked like a wizard. He felt like a wizard holding something very large very carefully. He walked to the warehouse. The ward at the door ran over him like cool water and found a magical signature that was unusual but not speed force and let him pass, and Harry opened the door and walked in. The interior was a single large space, old industrial, with the warehouse smell of damp concrete and rust. Caro had been working in here for 3 days and the evidence was visible, ritual preparation, the circular space in the center cleared and marked with chalk lines that were part geometry and part dark magic notation, components arranged on wooden surfaces around the periphery. The preparation was almost complete. The chalk lines were dry and fully formed. In the center of the circle, hands bound with cord that radiated the tight dark magic frequency of binding spells, sat a girl. 13, maybe. Red hair, pale, the contracted electromagnetic field of someone who had been afraid for a sustained period and had gone past the acute phase into the exhausted endurance of it. She looked up when Harry came in, and her eyes went wide. The two Death Eaters were by the far wall. They saw Harry at the same moment he saw them, and they moved fast, wands up, dark magic already forming, the reflexive action of trained fighters who had been on hair trigger for 3 days. Harry moved faster. Not at speed force speed, he wasn't ready to drop the suppression yet, wasn't ready to give away the full situation. He moved at wizard speed, which was still very fast, the fast of someone whose reflexes had been trained by 11 years of running at the speed of sound. He dropped below the first curse and came up inside the second Death Eater's guard and put his wand against the man's sternum and said, very calmly, "Stupefy." The man went down. The first Death Eater hit him with a cutting curse from behind and Harry pivoted and the curse took a strip of fabric from his shoulder rather than his back, and he looked at the Death Eater with the calm that was starting to communicate itself to the room the way calm could communicate itself when it was genuine rather than performed, and he said, "One more chance." The Death Eater cast a killing curse. Harry let the speed force go. It came back the way it always came back from suppression, not gradually, not building, but instantly, the full unified field snapping back into its active register like a light being switched on in a dark room, and the warehouse lit up gold-white in the wave of its return and the killing curse hit the speed force field around Harry and the speed force read the kinetic component and interfered with the trajectory and the curse went 45 degrees sideways into the concrete wall where it discharged in a crack of dark green light and a crater 6 inches deep. The Death Eater stared. "Your friend tried that," Harry said. "Different friend. Same result." He stunned him. The man hit the floor beside his colleague and the warehouse went quiet except for the girl's breathing and the ambient hum of the ritual preparation and the speed force running full and bright through every surface Harry stood on. Then Caro came out of the back room. He was not what Harry had expected, which was itself useful information. He'd expected someone who looked like what he was, diminished, damaged, 20 years of the speed force running wrong through his system. Instead Caro was a tall man in his mid-50s who moved with the careful precision of someone who has learned to manage their own unpredictability, and his magical field was exactly as Cisco had described, powerful, distorted, the dark magic amplified to a level that registered as physically hot even at 15 feet. He looked at his two unconscious associates. He looked at Harry. He did not look surprised. "I wondered when you'd come," Caro said. "Did you expect me specifically?" Harry said. "I expected someone," Caro said. He moved to the edge of the ritual circle and stood there, and his corrupted speed force fragment flared as he moved, visible, now that Harry was looking with the full unified field active, a sick yellowish gold rather than clean white, the frequency broken and stuttering. "You're not what I thought you'd be." "People say that," Harry said. "You're young," Caro said. "Younger than I modeled for." He looked at the girl in the center of the circle. "You know what I need her for." "Transference," Harry said. "Your fragment is unstable. You need a host whose field can absorb it more cleanly." He looked at the girl. "It would kill her." "It might not," Caro said, with the specific detachment of someone who has been using this particular reframing for long enough that it sounds neutral to them. "The theory allows for a small probability of survival." "Small," Harry said. "Non-zero," Caro said. Harry looked at him. The unified field read Caro's signature in full now, not just the surface, not just the dark magic disruption pattern, but the deeper structure, the way the corrupted speed force had been running through him for 20 years and what that had done to the man underneath. There was pain in it. Not the dramatic kind, the chronic kind, the kind you stop noticing because it's been the ground level of your experience for so long that it's just what existing feels like. 20 years of the speed force running wrong through your system. Harry thought about what it would be like to have what he had, the clean harmonic of the unified field, and to have it instead as this, broken, stuttering, dark, amplifying everything worst about you while giving you just enough of the speed to know what you were missing. He felt something he hadn't expected, which was something adjacent to compassion. Not sympathy for what Caro was doing. For what Caro was. You were on the perimeter at Godric's Hollow, Harry said. Caro went still. When the curse deflected, Harry said. The speed force fragment went out in the explosion. You were close enough. You absorbed a piece of it. You couldn't know that, Caro said. Very quiet. Ministry file, Harry said. Plus the signature. The distortion pattern matches what the speed force does when it's absorbed without framework. He paused. It's been running wrong in you since I was 1 year old. Yes, Caro said. The pain is constant, Harry said. Caro's expression moved. Something that had been tightly held moved, not into weakness but into the honesty of someone who has been alone with a truth for so long that having it acknowledged from outside feels seismic. Yes, he said, more quietly. That's why the transference, Harry said. Not the dark arts objective. Not Voldemort's goals. You want it out. It's destroying me, Caro said, and the flatness of it, the complete absence of drama, was the most honest thing he'd said. Every day for 20 years. The speed force in a system that can't hold it, it accelerates everything. Thought, feeling, the body's own processes. I'm aging faster than I should. The pain from a week ago, I can remember it as if it's happening now because for me the week ago is now, it's always now, the speed force doesn't let anything recede. He looked at Harry. Do you know what it's like to live at accelerated speed without the capacity to run? No, Harry said honestly. It is intolerable, Caro said. I have spent 20 years finding a way to make it stop. The girl is the best candidate I have found. Young, powerful, the field compatible enough for absorption. He looked at her. She won't feel anything. The binding spell ensures the transference is complete before she, no, Harry said. Caro looked at him. You're one person, he said. Without your speed, which I can, he gestured at the ward on the door, suppressed the way I suppressed it at the door, if you come within the circle, the ward on the door didn't suppress my speed, Harry said. It detected for my speed force signature and found nothing. I suppressed it myself, before I came in. I walked through your ward as a wizard because I chose to. I've been running fully since I let it go 5 minutes ago. He paused. You can't suppress me. That's not a threat, it's relevant information for what I'm offering. Caro went very still. What you're offering? You need the fragment out, Harry said. You don't need it transferred. You need it removed. He looked at the ritual circle, at the chalk lines and the components and 20 years of dark magical preparation. The transference ritual would put it into someone else. It doesn't destroy it. Destruction isn't possible, Caro said. I spent 15 years on that question. You spent 15 years on it without the unified field, Harry said. Speed, force and magic, integrated. The way they are in me. He looked at his hands. The white gold lightning was there, steady and clean, running between his fingers in the quiet way it did when he was thinking. I've been processing a soul fragment in my own system for 11 years. The speed force converts dark magic, uses it as fuel. What's in you is a speed force fragment running through dark magic. The mechanism would be different but the principle, you take it, Caro said. Very slowly. I'd process it, Harry said. The same way my system has been processing Voldemort's soul fragment. The speed force will handle the fragment. The magic will handle the dark component. You get it out. She goes home. He glanced at the girl. Everyone survives. Caro stared at him. I could be wrong, Harry said. It's a theory. I have a good track record with speed force theories but this one hasn't been tested. He met Caro's eyes. But your transference ritual will definitely kill her. So the comparison is, my untested theory versus your lethal certainty. You trust yourself with my fragment, Caro said. Inside you. Knowing what it is. I already have Voldemort's soul in me and it's making me stronger, Harry said. Your fragment is smaller and less organized. The unified field has managed worse. Caro was silent for a long time. The warehouse held the silence the way large empty spaces did, neutrally, without weight. The girl was watching Harry with eyes that had moved from exhausted fear into something more alert, following the conversation, putting things together, the quick intelligence of someone whose fear hadn't stopped their mind. Why? Caro said finally. Why would you do this? Harry looked at him. At the tall careful man with the corrupted field and 20 years of constant pain and the very precise intelligence of someone who had been thinking alone about one problem for longer than Harry had been alive. Because you're not your worst choice, Harry said. You made a catastrophic one tonight, this girl, this ritual, this plan. But the thing that drove you to it isn't evil. It's 20 years of agony looking for an exit. And the exit you picked is wrong, but there's another one. He paused. And if I leave you with the fragment and you spend the next 20 years finding another candidate, that's on me. Caro looked at him for another long moment. The fragment removal, he said. How? Contact, Harry said. The speed force transfers through physical contact, it's how Barry infected me, probably, though his was unconscious. I touch you. The unified field reads the fragment. The speed force does what it does. And if it goes wrong? Caro said. Define wrong, Harry said. If the fragment interacts with your system the way mine has with me, Caro said. If the corruption, the unified field is not corruptible in the same way, Harry said. The speed force in me runs through the magic. There's no surface the fragment can find purchase on that isn't already occupied. He paused. The theory is sound. I am confident in the theory. You're 12 years old, Caro said. I'm aware, Harry said. Does the age change the theory? A long pause. Then Caro said, quietly, no. Harry crossed to him. He stopped at arm's length and looked at the man, at the exhaustion in him, the pain held at distance through sheer will, the intelligence that had been used so badly for so long because pain and desperation were not good editorial filters. He thought about what Cisco had said, reading him like a circuit doing what it was designed to do, and he thought about what design was, what intention was, what it meant to be built for something and end up doing something else. He put his hand on Caro's arm. The unified field moved. Not aggressively, not the aggressive interference that had happened with Quirrell, with the soul fragment and the dark magic and the direct opposition of the speed force to a corrupted presence. This was different. The unified field extended toward the fragment in Caro the way water extended toward a dry surface, filling available space, running through channels that were already there, the speed force recognizing a version of itself even in its most distorted form. Caro made a sound. Hold still, Harry said quietly. The fragment in Caro resisted at first, not intelligently, not with Voldemort's deliberate opposition, but with the reflexive resistance of something that had been in one place for 20 years and was being moved. Harry felt the unified field work around it, the magic component of his system reaching into the space between Caro dark magic and the speed force fragment, finding the boundary between them, the interface layer. He thought about Hermione's description of the soul fragment in him, in the space between what you are. The interface layer. The space between the speed force and the magic, where the two systems met and merged. The fragment was there in Caro too, in the same liminal space, and the unified field put a thread of itself into that space and pulled. The fragment came. It came out of Caro and into the interface layer between Harry's speed force and his magic, and the unified field received it with the same inexorable certainty it had brought to every dark magic component it had ever processed, and Harry felt it arrive, not as a presence, not as consciousness, but as a lump of compressed dark energy that tasted like the specific dissonance of Caro's signature and smelled like the wrongness he'd been reading from 50 feet away. The unified field began to process it immediately. Caro's legs gave out. Harry caught him with his free hand, the speed force answering the physical demand of supporting a full-grown man's weight before the thought was fully formed, and lowered him to the floor. Caro sat there on the concrete and put both hands against the ground and breathed like a man who has just set down something very heavy, something that had been so heavy for so long that the act of setting it down was its own kind of shock. "Gone," Harry said. Caro looked up at him. His field had changed, Harry could read it clearly, the dark magic still there, still substantial, the man was a dark wizard and that didn't change with the fragment's removal, but the dissonance was gone, the broken engine rhythm of the corrupted speed force, the pain signal embedded in every wave of his energy pattern. "Yes," Caro said. Barely audible. "Yes." "Okay," Harry said. He walked to the girl. She watched him come with the alert intelligent eyes of someone who had been listening carefully and was reassessing everything she'd thought was going to happen today. He crouched down in front of her and looked at the binding cord, felt the dark magic in it, and put 2 fingers against the knot. The speed force ran through the cord at the specific frequency that disrupted the binding spell's magical structure, and the cord fell loose, and the girl pulled her hands to her chest and looked at them for a second, then looked at Harry. "Are you all right?" he said. "My wrists hurt," she said. Her voice was steady. She'd been frightened for days and she was still frightened and she was talking clearly and directly anyway, which told him something about her. "Who are you?" "Harry Potter," he said. She stared at him. "Yeah," he said. "It's been a long day. Can you stand?" She stood. She was steadier than she had any reason to be, the electromagnetic contraction of her field already beginning to ease now that the binding was off. Her magical signature, uncompressed, was strong. Caro had been right about the compatibility, which was the most uncomfortable validation Harry had experienced in a while. She was powerful and young and she'd had absolutely no idea what she was being used for, and the specificity of Caro's 20 years of planning landing on her specifically, on the chance of her compatible signature, made Harry's chest feel tight in a particular way. "What's your name?" he said. "Nora," she said. "Nora Whitewick. I was just in Edinburgh with my mum, we were shopping, and the man," she looked at Caro on the floor, "he just appeared and then I was here and, you're safe now," Harry said. "I'm going to get you back to your mum." He looked at the 2 unconscious Death Eaters on the floor, then at Caro, then at the ritual circle. He opened the comm, "Cisco." "I heard everything," Cisco said. "All of it. I have Hermione here too, she heard everything." "How's the fragment reading?" Harry said. "Processing," Cisco said, and his voice had the specific quality of someone reading something extraordinary in real time. The unified field has it. It's running through the same conversion process as the other one. Stable." A pause. "The reading on you is completely stable, Harry. The unified field didn't even hiccup." "Good," Harry said. "I need ministry contact. Clearwater or Vance. The 2 Death Eaters need collection and Caro needs," he looked at Caro needs medical, St. Mungo's probably, and then a legal process, but flagged the fragment removal as mitigating context. "I'll provide a full account." "On it," Cisco said. "And Harry, yeah. Barry's on his way," Cisco said. "I called him 20 minutes ago. He wanted to know you were." "I know," Harry said. "Tell him I'm fine." Caro was still on the floor. He'd pulled himself to a sitting position against the far wall, away from the ritual circle, and he was looking at his own hands with the specific expression of someone taking an inventory that they know is going to turn up something complicated. His field was the dark wizard field. Harry could read it clearly now without the corrupted fragment distorting everything, read it the way he'd been reading Clearwater's field, looking for the quality of it. It wasn't clean. But it wasn't the systematic darkness of Bellatrix Lestrange's file or the Death Eaters he'd read at Hogwarts, the chosen and dedicated darkness. It was more like a field that had been forced into dark patterns over 20 years of operating in a state of constant pain, the magic bent by the conditions it had operated in rather than by deep intention. Not an excuse. Not an absolution. Just a fact that was relevant to what came next. Caro, Harry said. The man looked up. The ministry is coming, Harry said. You'll face charges for the abduction. You should. He looked at him steadily. The fragment removal, they'll know about it because I'll tell them. What you do with that is up to you. Caro looked at him with the exhausted clarity of someone who has just had the pain that defined their life removed and is trying to understand who they are without it. Why are you telling me this, he said. Because information is more useful than ignorance, Harry said. And because you're going to need to make choices from here that have nothing to do with what you were. The fragment's gone. What you do without it is yours. He paused. I'm not forgiving you for tonight. But I'm not writing your future for you either. Caro looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in his face that might have been the beginning of something, some reorientation toward a direction that hadn't been available when every moment was defined by the corrupted Speed Force fragment. You're 12, he said again. Still yes, Harry said. Nora, who had been listening to this exchange with the focused attention of someone who had been through something awful and was processing it by understanding it, said, "Can I have a glass of water?" Harry looked around the warehouse. There was a table with various items in the corner. He found a sealed water bottle and brought it to her. She drank half of it immediately and then looked at him. You took something out of him, she said. Something bad. And put it in yourself. In a manner of speaking, Harry said. Why, she said. Because it was the solution that cost the least, Harry said. She looked at him with the frank assessment of someone too young to have learned to be indirect about what they were thinking. You're strange, she said. Yeah, Harry said. Good strange, she said. Barry arrived 7 minutes later, which was 4 minutes after the ministry appeared via emergency port key and 2 minutes after Clearwater herself showed up looking like someone who had been managing a very complicated situation from a distance and needed to see the room before she could file it properly. Barry came through the door in civilian clothes. He'd been transitioning from Coast City to Central City and had still been in street gear, and he looked at the unconscious Death Eaters and the ritual circle and Caro against the wall and the ministry personnel and Nora with her water bottle, and then he looked at Harry. Harry looked back. Barry crossed the floor and put both hands on Harry's shoulders and looked at him with the comprehensive parental assessment. Stable, Harry said, preempting the question. Unified field is stable. 2 fragments now, both processing. He paused. Cisco has the readings. Barry looked at him for a moment longer, at the white gold lightning at Harry's hands and the expression on his face, which was the clear and focused one settling back toward the everyday one as the situation resolved. You went to Edinburgh alone, Barry said. I went to Edinburgh with a plan and a calm line and Hermione and Cisco monitoring, Harry said. That's not alone. Harry. I'm telling you what I did, Harry said. Not asking if it was okay. It needed to be done and it needed to be done in a specific window and I had the capability. He met Barry's eyes. I'm telling you right now, completely, what happened and what I decided and why. That's what I'm doing. Barry was quiet for a moment. You called Cisco before you went, Barry said. Yes. You set up monitoring and backup channels, Barry said. Yes. You worked the problem, found a non-lethal solution, and got the kid out safe, Barry said. Yes, Harry said. Barry looked at him. I hate this, he said. I want it on record that I hate this. Noted, Harry said. You're 12, Barry said. Cisco and Caro both said that tonight, Harry said. It keeps coming up. Because it's relevant, Barry said, with the feeling of a man who has been saying this for years and is aware it's losing ground. You keep doing things that make the 12 seem like a technicality. Harry said. Barry's expression did several things. Yes, he said, with considerable resignation. A technicality. Clearwater appeared at Harry's elbow. She looked at Barry and then at Harry and then at Caro and then at the ritual circle. She said, with the controlled precision of a woman processing an enormous amount of information while maintaining professional composure, full account. Everything. I need it. Walk with me, Harry said, and began. He gave her the full account, everything, leaving nothing out, the ministry file, the Godric's hollow connection, the fragment theory, the suppression of his Speed Force signature to enter the building, the confrontation, the decision to attempt the removal rather than the conventional intervention, the removal itself. He gave it to her in order, factually, and she listened without interrupting until the end. You took a corrupted Speed Force fragment into your own system, she said. Yes, Harry said. Voluntarily, she said. Yes, Harry said. Because the alternative was a lethal ritual, she said. And because leaving him with the fragment meant future attempts, Harry said. This addresses the problem rather than delaying it. She looked at him. She looked at Barry, who was standing slightly behind Harry with an expression that said everything about the experience of parenting someone like Harry Potter, the simultaneous pride and stress and the knowledge that both were appropriate. The charges against Caro, she said. The fragment removal. You want this considered as mitigating. Not eliminating, Harry said. He abducted a child and planned to kill her. But the fragment removal is relevant context for understanding the motivation over 20 years. The charges stand. You're advocating for someone who was going to kill a child tonight, she said. I'm providing complete information, Harry said. You decide what to do with it. That's your job. Mine was stopping it. Clearwater looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, quietly enough that only Harry could hear, the briefing was inadequate in ways I am still discovering. I know, Harry said. Nora was taken home to her mother by a ministry official. She looked at Harry before she left, from across the warehouse, the full look of someone committing something to memory, and he nodded at her. She nodded back, the serious, adult nod of someone who'd been through something serious, and then she went. Outside the warehouse, the Edinburgh night was cool and dark and smelling of the water of Leith, which was the particular smell of moving water in an old city, stone and current. Harry stood on the pavement and felt the unified field running its deep register, both fragments now processing in the interface layer, the Speed Force moving through them with the steady certainty of something that had been doing this a long time and found the work natural. Barry stood beside him. The Coast City thing, Harry said. Is it handled? Yeah, Barry said. Meta with weather manipulation. Took most of yesterday. He looked at the sky. I got Cisco's call in the middle of the debrief. Sorry, Harry said. Don't be, Barry said. You didn't ask him to call during the debrief. You asked him to call period. He paused. You handled it. With Cisco and Hermione on the line, Harry said. Yeah, Barry said. That's how it should work. You don't go alone. You go with backup, you go with a plan, and you go when it needs doing. Harry looked at him. That's more or less what I did. I know, Barry said. That's why I'm not, he stopped. I'm not angry, he said. I want you to know that. The thing I feel is, not anger. Fear, Harry said. Barry was quiet. The difference between what I feel and what you feel when I do something like this, Harry said, is the difference between the person running and the person watching the person run. He looked at his hands. I know you're afraid sometimes. Not for me, you're afraid because you trust me and you know my capability and you still know that something could happen that I didn't see coming. And you'd have to find out afterward. Yeah, Barry said, very quietly. That's exactly it. I'm going to do necessary things, Harry said. That's not going to stop. But you're going to know about them, not permission. I don't ask permission for necessary things, but I tell you everything afterward and I set up backup and I don't operate alone. He paused. That's the deal I'm offering. Barry looked at the water of Leith. He looked at the Edinburgh sky and the city's nighttime lights and the particular old quality of a city that had been here a long time and was still here. He thought about a 4-year-old on a cot and a parking lot and pasta timing and everything in between that had made this particular person standing beside him on this particular pavement at 12 years old. "Deal," he said. The speed force hummed between them, warm and deep and clean, the unified field running steady in Harry's chest, the fragments processing in the interface layer, the old dark magic being converted to clean energy with the inexorable patience of a system that had been doing this since before Harry knew what it was doing. "Second year starts in 2 weeks, Harry said. "I know," Barry said. "There's a Horcrux situation," Harry said. "Dumbledore's going to want a conversation." "I know that too," Barry said. "And something Cisco found in the unified field data about the temporal kinetic potential, Harry," Barry said. "Yeah. 2 weeks," Barry said. "We've got 2 weeks before any of that matters." Harry looked at him. "Hermione's in Central City," Barry said. "Ron sent a letter this morning that ended with a question about whether America has good chess. Joe's making dinner Sunday and Iris is coming." He turned from the water of Leith. "Come home. B12 for 2 weeks. All of that," he gestured at the warehouse, "at the night, at the horizon, will still be there. It always will be." Harry looked at Barry, at the man who had found him in a cupboard and run alongside him in parking lots and learned to make pasta and built a life that was big enough to include everything Harry was, which was a lot, and had never once asked him to be smaller. He felt the unified field run its deep, content, steady register. He felt the speed force warm and certain and completely in its rightful place. He felt 12 years old, which was, all things considered, not a bad thing to feel. "Okay," Harry said. "Yeah." Barry said. "Yeah," Harry said. "Let's go home." Barry put his arm around his shoulders, and they walked away from the warehouse and the water of Leith and the cleaned-up mess of everything that needed doing, and somewhere above the Edinburgh clouds the stars were running their own ancient circuits, and the speed force ran between two people who had found each other at the exact moment they were supposed to and had been running alongside each other ever since. And Harry Potter, the boy from the cupboard, the fastest wizard alive, the nexus of the unified field, the son Barry Allen had not planned for and could not imagine not having, walked through the Edinburgh night and was, without performance or apology, exactly who he was. Which was, as it turned out, more than enough. More than enough for everything that was coming. More than enough for everything.